Breaking news, CBS is canceling The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Colbert just making the shocking announcement at his show taping. Now, it's unclear why the show is canceled, but it comes after Colbert spoke out against his parent company, Paramount's $16 million settlement with Trump over the editing of a 60 Minutes interview. In fact, here's what Colbert said just a few days ago.
Now, I believe this kind of complicated financial settlement with a sitting government official has a technical name in legal circles. It's big fat bribe. Because this all comes as Paramount's owners are trying to get the Trump administration to approve the sale of our network to a new owner, Skydance.
And now, hearing that that show is canceled, Brian Stelter's out front. I mean, Brian, what more are you learning about what is, frankly, a stunning announcement? When we were talking about it, just found out about it here in this commercial break, I said, wait, what? What just happened?
It really doesn't make any sense. From the normal business logic of television goes like this. Stephen Colbert is the highest rated program in late night television. He beats his competitors. He's been going at it for 10 years, and frankly, he's been on a hot streak lately. So by the business logic of television, normally he would be in a very safe spot. However, CBS says this is a financial decision given the difficulties with the entire late night sector. And there is some truth to that explanation. I reported a couple years ago about the Late Late Show ending with James Corden because it wasn't profitable anymore. So there might be some rationale to this CBS announcement. But almost everybody, upon hearing about this, is connecting it to the Paramount settlement from 2 weeks ago. Because as you said, it was just 2 weeks ago that President Trump struck a deal with the parent of CBS, that $16 million settlement. Of course, Trump later said that there were other terms on top of the $16 million. He referenced getting public service announcements from CBS, for example. And all this comes as one owner of CBS, Sherry Redstone, is about to hand off to a new owner, David Ellison, and his company, Skydance Media. There have been speculation raging online for the last 2 weeks about whether Skydance was going to try to push Colbert out. In fact, this had been such a hot topic that Colbert came back from vacation on Monday and he made jokes about it. He said he had a new mustache and so the new owners wouldn't be able to find him. So on Monday, Colbert was joking about possibly being in danger. On Wednesday, he found out his show was being canceled. Today, he announced it. And this all takes effect next May, Aaron. So he does have one more season. But this means one of the staunchest Trump critics on television will be leaving.
Yeah, and incredible to think, and I know we will learn more here in the coming days, how quickly it all seemed to fall apart. And things like this generally don't fall apart all of the sudden, unless there's a reason. Brian, thank you very much.
Facilitating abuse for leverage suits all of them, and it angers them too. Now, it may well be the case that releasing all of the paperwork would prove nothing new, while unfairly implicating many innocent people who obsessively cultivated the contacts by Epstein. And if so, then well, that was always going to be the case. But many people who are now in power created this monster, and they're finding out that if you don't feed the beast, it will eventually come back and eat you. Well, joining me on the panel to discuss all this is Rob Smith, host of the Can't Cancel Rob Smith podcast and fellow from the Rainey Center for Public Policy. Joe Walsh, the former Republican congressman for Illinois, a presidential candidate. Josh Hammer, host of the Josh Hammer Show and author of Israel and Civilization. And Liz Wheeler, the host of the Liz Wheeler Show. Well, welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, Joe Walsh. There's a lot going on. There's been a lot going on since the day Donald Trump won the election. There's a lot swirling around, and unusually, Donald Trump is doing stuff which is angering his own hardcore MAGA base. You could point to the strike on Iran. I thought we weren't going to interfere in foreign wars anymore. He did. Now we're seeing that he may be lining up to inject a lot of money and support in favor of Ukraine against Russia. Again, a lot of the MAGA crowd don't like that. And then you have the Epstein scandal, where the MAGA crowd were led to believe the moment the Trump administration got their hands on all the files, everything would be revealed and true accountability would follow. That isn't happening. So Trump's got an interesting issue here of how to retain his base. He's been very loyal to him, at the same time as making big decisions which are enraging them. What do you make of this?
Good to be with you, Pierce. Look, I've never thought that Trump's followers follow him based on any sort of issues. He's a symbol for them. He's a clenched fist for them. He's always been perceived of as an outsider who's going to reveal the deep state. Pierce, that's why I think this Epstein story is going to damage him big time. It's not just Bondi and Bongino and Patel who are out there for a few years lying, right, to their audiences about, oh my God, the Epstein thing, the files, the list. I'm going to deliver Bill Clinton's head on a platter. Trump was saying the same damn thing. So when you look at this Epstein list, they promised their MAGA base that this was going to be the mother of all deep state, going after the elite pedophile kind of a scandal like we've never seen. And now Bondi, Patel, Bongino, and Trump are all saying nothing there. Let's look away. Let's move on. They can't do that. So either, Pierce, they were all lying to their base and then they assume roles in government and they learn the truth, or it's more sinister than that and they're covering up for Trump. Why would Donald Trump want to move on from the Epstein files? Makes no sense.
Well, the thing, Rob Smith, which complicates it is, of course, the Elon Musk fallout with Donald Trump a few weeks ago, and Elon, in the middle of the night, unleashing what he called the biggest bombshell of his falling out with Trump, which is that Donald Trump is in the Epstein Files. And since then, all the apparent enthusiasm by the Trump administration, a lot of Alina Hab came on here and was, telling me about how big it was going to be and how many people were involved and so on and so on. None of that has materialized. But, people are putting 2 and 2 together here, and maybe they're getting 5, but they're saying Elon Musk says that, and then the whole thing gets shut down. And the problem with that is it lends itself, obviously, to furious speculation.
All right, Piers, let me make, thanks for having me. Let me make a couple of points here. First, my first point is this. The concern over the Jeffrey Epstein case and the Epstein files and all of this stuff doesn't really seem to be a concern of the everyday American that voted for Donald Trump. It seems to be an exclusive concern of the types of people, myself included as one of my side jobs, that speaks on camera or podcasts or spends time on social media every single day. In addition to being a podcaster and a content creator, I'm also a fellow with the Rainey Center for Public Policy. And as such, I talk with local and state legislators all across the country. They want to talk about deporting illegal immigrants. They want to talk about making sure that America can compete with China.
I went on with my pal Mark Halperin on his Next Up show this morning. We taped it before I taped my show. Well, we're doing this live. And Halperin is everywhere. He does that show and he does Two Way and he's like, whatever. And apparently on his Two Way show today, and even in our interview, he raised this with me and I knew what he was talking about. But I want to tell you what happened. On Two Way, he said the following: everyone I know believes a major newspaper, one of the top 3 newspapers in the country, is about to publish a piece about President Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Everyone I know knows that, and people in the White House know that too. When that story drops, if it drops today, and some people think it might, it could drive the day. Then he asks the following questions to Dan Turrentine and Sean Spicer. Either answer them or say, in fact, we don't know. How did Trump and Jeffrey Epstein meet? I don't know, they say. Did Trump ever go to Jeffrey Epstein's townhouse? Yes. It's not a townhouse, it's a mansion. How many times? I believe many. What occasions? One-on-one parties? What did he go for? I don't know. Okay, he's just asking these questions. It's fine. These guys don't know. I think I know the answers to a lot of these, and I answered them on Halperin's show. So if you want to hear my answers, you can tune in to Next Up. Not that I'm some expert on Epstein. I've just been neck deep in all of these reports over the past, couple of weeks for obvious reasons. But I can tell you, I don't know why we're afraid to say it's the Wall Street Journal. Maybe that will turn out to be untrue, but I've been told by multiple sources that the Journal's working on a piece on Trump and Epstein. And guys, there's no question in my mind that there's going to be a lot there because they knew each other for 15 years. They were actually close friends for 15 years prior to Epstein's troubles. And I'm sure they did spend a lot of time together. But what does that tell us? He spent a lot of time with a lot of luminaries, and they weren't all pedophiles, right? It's like a lot of them, some of them were women. It was the Dalai Lama was over at Epstein's house. Michael Wolff just told Vicky Ward that a couple of days ago, and we could go on. So it doesn't make Trump look bad, or it doesn't incriminate him in any way that he was friends with the guy. He's already admitted that. The question is, are you going to produce evidence that Trump took advantage of an underaged girl? Now, if they're there, then we're talking a scandal. But honestly, if somebody's got that proof, we would have seen it by now, would we not?
Yeah. The Biden administration had access to all of these files, at least the Biden Justice Department did, whether or not the president or any of his people looked at it. The possibility that this information, this damning, incriminating information that would have devastated Donald Trump's future prospects as a politician, or perhaps even brought him under criminal suspicion, the likelihood that that would not have already come out years ago is unbelievably low. I just can't imagine it. We've seen leaks of absolutely everything else. We've seen legal trials that have been completely prosecuted on much thinner, less sensational grounds.
He was accused of rape.
Already. So that doesn't seem to be what's hidden here or obscured anyways.
E. Jean Carroll accused him of rape, which was a completely bullshit allegation. I don't believe one word that E. Jean Carroll said. But Trump is on camera with the, you can grab him by the P word and they let you get away with it when you're a celebrity. So it's like the fact that Trump might have had a handsy 40s and 50s, or even earlier than that, I don't know, is not going to come as a huge shock, Matt. But if there were proof that he had a thing for underaged girls, you don't think we'd know that by now?
I think we would know that. I think the potential political damage of this story, and let's keep in mind the Wall Street Journal was not alone, but they were ahead of the pack mostly in writing about the Biden White House Operation Bubble Wrap cover-up for months and years. They did.
Wait,
really
is that
good
a real
work.
term, or are you just saying that? Because I love that.
No, that was the term. That was the term among both the Journal and the New York Times reporting about the
I must have
handlers of
forgotten that.
Joe Biden.
That's awesome.
We talked about it on this show. They used Operation Bubble Wrap to describe the Dr. Jill Biden kind of initiative. And maybe we'll even talk about that later on in the episode, who knows. But so anyways, Wall Street Journal does good reporting, period. But right now, I think the fact of the matter about the politics of this is that Trump is facing a political challenge, the likes of which he hasn't really seen in a good while, which is that some people in his base are like, I don't know, dude. I don't like how you're handling this, or I don't like how your administration is handling this. And at a time when there's a lot of people who are more of the independent bent among people in media, the conservative media, podcasts and Substack, who are dissatisfied with the level of disclosure so far in Epstein-related information from the Justice Department, having the story drop to remind you of what we already know on the record, is that he does have a relationship, as does a lot of people, including several people that all three of us know have been to Epstein's island or have had interactions with him, scientists and people like that. But the timing of that information at a time when there's these struggles between Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino, and when there are people who haven't gone full Charlie Kirk in that they haven't gotten a call from the president and said, okay, I'll stop talking about it. People are still talking about it on the right.
Well, Charlie is too. He had that one day of I'm not doing it. And then the next 2 days, his shows have been heavily
good on
Epstein.
Charlie, which is not something that I say every single day. But Trump just went out and called those people on the right and within MAGA who are talking about it still, he called them a bunch of losers. He said he's lost respect.
Bad people who are weaklings.
Weaklings, and that they're working for the fake news, and that this is all like a fake news plot or a liberal democratic plot that you fell for. It's a hoax, and etc. It's going to be really interesting against that backdrop to see what those people do. You have just been insulted by the president. I don't know, Megan, if you know this, but sometimes Donald Trump insults people in the media on the right.
It's a day ending in Y.
I mean,
look, I will say for the record, my advice to all those people who are on the right is just keep doing your thing. You can't run a show that way, a journalistic outfit. You really can't run that way. President Trump will get mad at any journalist who is doing their job, and I don't Forget the fake news. They got their own issues. But I mean, honest reporters who actually like Trump and are fair to Trump. And you just, you know, it's part of being a journalist. You are disliked more than you're liked. And that's just the way it goes if you're doing your job right.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, though, without having seen the Wall Street Journal reporting or the reporting from whomever it is going to be publishing this story, there's no possibility that we would be talking about this or that this story would be coming out if there was not this profound mishandling of the disclosures related to the Epstein investigation.
Yeah.
Like, everything about this has gone badly for the administration. The messaging around it has been absolutely terrible. Like, someone should absolutely lose their job over it. Whether or not it happens this week or a couple of weeks from now is the only question, I suppose, that actually ought to be seriously entertained. But they mishandled this. Like, one doesn't have to believe any sort of conspiracy theories to look at the situation, to raise an eyebrow and say, what on earth is going on over there? Who is responsible for actually talking to the public?
When I think about, like, oh, I don't know what they have. Is it a picture of Trump with like a young girl? Like, it's not going to be with some, you know, really young girl, but let's say like as a 17-year-old girl. If that had come out, if they have that and that comes out, on any other day, it'd be like, all right, whatever. You know, everybody knows that Trump was a bit of a playboy when he was younger. You know, he's had multiple wives. He was a man about town when he was younger. And it wouldn't have been a total yawn, but it would have been mostly a yawn. Certainly his supporters would not have given two figs about that. But now would be a terrible time for that to drop because of the way this is all snowballed into, like, why is he so adamant about not releasing another document? And then if they drop this story with that kind of thing now, it could potentially hurt him because now even his own supporters have been insulted for actually caring about child, you know, issues, including potentially sexual abuse. And then you see that and you think, oh, how much is there in this lane? And what does that explain? I'll give you the last thought on that. Whoever wants to take it in the 30 seconds we have before a break.
Just to say that Trump has, over the last 10 years, successfully used insult comedy to kind of bring his base into line and into check, most famously, in my point of view, with the House Freedom Caucus, which started off as an antagonist, and then he whipped them into line by the end of 2017. Can he do that with his base of people who are independent in media? We are going to find out.
Since President Trump was sworn in, his administration has made enormous progress at a breakneck pace. But don't forget, while they're moving mountains for the good of the nation, you've got your own personal savings to worry about. And one of the best ways to look after your savings is through diversification, particularly with gold, like from Birch Gold Group. In the past 12 months, the value of gold has increased by 40%. OMG. Central banks continue to bolster demand for gold by buying in record quantities. Global instability and tension is high, and
my brothers and sisters, Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to News Nation. This is where right and left can come to just be reasonable. I see great irony in this situation where you've been told almost nothing, and yet the situation is so telling about everything going on in our politics. I'm talking about Epstein, of course. Despite so little coming out about Epstein's death, his consorts, his universe, the reaction to it is a reflection of where we are in our politics, if not in our society. And by the way, I still see a difference with a distinction between those two. This country, the majority of us, still agree on most things. We just have to get past magnified minorities that dominate our politics. It's because of them that we are in the Epstein epileptic fits, distracted by a situation that doesn't really matter to the overwhelming majority of us in our lives in this country. Yes, I think the administration has screwed this up and owes MAGA folk explanations of previous promises. And they should fight the judges for what is redacted and release what they have. I believe that. And I don't think it's going away. But it ain't the national debt. It ain't the economy. It ain't immigration. It's not an issue that affects us all for generations. It's a story that cuts right down partisan lines for absolutely no good reason. It just cuts down partisan lines because that's all we're about. The simple fact that we are in a binary battle to the bottom where everything gets processed as whether or not it plays to the advantage of one side over the other. even Epstein. Don't take my word for it. Look at the polling. Not big in terms of outcomes, but in terms of preferences in a moment, you can get something out of polling. 40% of Republicans support how Trump's administration handled Epstein. 36% disapprove. How? How? When all of this negativity has been generated from within MAGA. How do you get to 40-something%, almost 50%? And there's been obvious mishandling or non-handling of the situation up to this point. How can you be satisfied with the handling when there's been no handling? Because they stick with their side. Same explanation for polling on the Democratic side. Why would 83% of Democrats disapprove? Only 2% approve of the handling of Epstein. Since when? This issue has been nowhere on the left. Not for the membership, not for its leadership, and yet such extreme disapproval? Why? Because they are automatically, reflexively against Trump's interests. And being satisfied with the handling of Epstein or anything good for Trump is anathema to the cause. So we see one reality here, which is a reminder that you must reject this game of politics. And the majority has to reject what it watches and what it absorbs on social media and what it asks of its leaders. We have to push to get back to focusing on the interests of the many and not just the fanaticism of the few. You know who agrees with me, at least right now? The President of the United States. The President is finally doing something on the Epstein case that I wish he would do on issues that actually matter a hell of a lot more, like economic policy, tariffs, immigration policy. He's telling the extremists who exist on harshness and far-out positions, basically, to F off. Now, this is new for Trump, telling the mega MAGA to take a hike. So he's kind of wading in. He's tiptoeing in. He's still trying to blame the Democrats for the Epstein situation, which ain't going to work. But this is the first and certainly strongest rebuke we've heard from Trump of his own. The Democrats' new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past, all caps, supporters have bought into this bullshizzle. Hook, line, and sinker. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. I don't want their support anymore. Remember, Andrew Schultz, Charlie Kirk, Joe Rogan, all the pod bros. Past. BS. Weak. That's pretty ballsy for Trump to do that. Now, again, no way Democrats are to blame for Epstein, okay? You can blame them for jumping on the issue and trying to play it to advantage, but again, that's about hating the game, not the players, for me at least. This is going on because Trump courted extremists and harnessed their grievance and their disaffection, and that motivated the inception of MAGA. No, what he's doing right now, I would argue, is the right thing on one level. I do believe he owes them disclosure, and transparency is something he campaigned on. We didn't get it with the UFOs. We haven't gotten it yet with JFK. Got Anna Paulina Luna tonight to talk about that, representative out of Florida. There's been an advance there. We'll have it. But now you're not getting it with Epstein. So I get them being pissed off. But this is risky for Trump because, as I've argued here before, MAGA is bigger than him. And this
Jeffrey Epstein now threatening to derail Trump's agenda. On Capitol Hill tonight, Epstein is front and center. Several Republican holdouts are saying they will not move forward on a vote on Trump's DOJ cuts unless they get Epstein too. And House Speaker Mike Johnson's back is up against the wall because the House faces a Friday deadline at midnight. So we're counting down here to act on Trump's cuts to the government funding package. And GOP holdouts say that their constituents are the ones that are demanding answers on Jeffrey Epstein, as MAGA media is not letting up.
Trump has done a F-. I mean, my God, it's worse than an F. I mean, it's like a 0 on the Streisand affecting and not having clarity and flip-flopping back and forth. It's just been horrifying.
Trump did this to himself. And it's not even about, let's say, Epstein hooking him up with some hot 20-year-old 40 years ago. It's the fact that he came out and insulted his base and said it was a hoax. And so the whole thing is just crazy, and I don't want to get into all of it now. We'll get into it coming up, but it's just going to get worse.
All right. The man you heard speaking right there at the end was someone who spent time in jail because of his role leading up to January 6th. All right, so the people who are saying this aren't people who were on the fence about Trump. These are the people who vaulted Trump back to the White House, like Nick Fuentes, the white nationalist whom Trump has hosted at Mar-a-Lago.
And now he says, if you're not on board with the Epstein cover-up, oh, I don't want your support. You're a weakling. You. You. You suck. You are fat. You are a joke. You are stupid. You are not funny. You are not as smart as you think you are. We are going to look back on the MAGA movement as the biggest scam in American history.
I mean, to think that those words came out of his mouth, they're going to look back on the MAGA movement as the biggest scam in American history. I mean, these are people who made their names on the MAGA movement, inside the MAGA movement, by support of Trump. And their attacks are heard by millions and millions. And then there's Elon Musk, who's also stepping up his calls for more information. Today, he posted this, "Where's phase 2?" And alongside that was a picture of the Epstein Files, phase 1. Now, the White House is doing all that it can to make this story go away. In fact, the administration is completely trying to change the subject. They'd rather talk about Trump's swollen ankles, for God's sake. And the Attorney General today went to Alcatraz, Pam Bondi touring the 91-year-old former federal prison because of Trump's desire to transform that national park back into a prison. And following Bondi, the pro-Trump network, Fox News, California's Governor Gavin Newsom's office responding with a statement to that, saying Pam Bondi will reopen Alcatraz same day Trump lets her release the Epstein Files. So, well, if you listen to the White House, though, there is no desire at this moment to release more information on Epstein.
It was this president who directed the Department of Justice and the Attorney General to do an exhaustive review of all files related to Jeffrey Epstein, which they did. They spent many months going through all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein, and they concluded what they found in that memo, which they drafted and they released. And so the president has been transparent.
Of course, all those questions still remain. Nothing? Of all the rich and powerful people who associated with Epstein over so many years, there's absolutely nothing for anyone to see? Let's go to Manu Raju live on Capitol Hill. I mean, Manu, what you are watching unfold on Capitol Hill, GOP versus GOP when it comes to a signature bill Trump wants to pass, and a whole lot of members of the GOP say, no way, not until we get Epstein?
Yeah, this is a fight that's really been intensifying all week long from Donald Trump's closest allies on Capitol Hill who are demanding more information or simply shrugging off all of Trump's attacks against them. Trump has tried to call them foolish. He's called some of them stupid. He called this a Democratic hoax. Many of them are simply saying, that's fine. You can say that, Mr. President, but we still want this information released. And Speaker Mike Johnson has to contend with the reality of the narrowness of his majority in the House. If any handful of members decide they want something and hold out their support, he has to listen to them and potentially cater to their demands. And that is exactly what is happening with this bill that Donald Trump wants passed by the end of this week, by the end of Friday, the bill to cut roughly $9 billion in federal funding for foreign aid and for public broadcasting. But those holdouts want a vote, a separate vote on an Epstein-related matter, potentially to release all of the Epstein files. And that has been the source of the negotiations, intense negotiations that have been happening all day long. Now, Aaron, I am told that the Republican leaders plan to still have a vote tonight on this bill to cut roughly $9 billion. And there's some signs that there potentially could be a resolution with those Republican holdouts. And in a key meeting that is happening right now in the House, Democrats are pressing for information about any deal that was released related to Jeffrey Epstein. The Republicans on that committee so far have not divulged the details about a deal, about any separate vote related to Jeffrey Epstein. But as one of the key questions tonight in the Capitol, what did Johnson have to agree to on Jeffrey Epstein to get to Trump's agenda moving ahead as the plan to do so to get this bill passed by the end of the night, Aaron?
All right. Thank you very much, Manu. So I want to go straight out front now to someone in the center of all of this. That is the Republican Congressman, Tim Burchett. He is a co-sponsor of a resolution in the House to release files on Jeffrey Epstein. I very much appreciate your time. So Manu's reporting, maybe there's a vote that will happen, that maybe Johnson has agreed to something on Epstein. You're obviously in the center of this. You're central to this legislation. Is there an agreement at this point?
No, ma'am, there's not. And honestly, if the Democrats were serious about this issue, they wouldn't have waited 4 years to bring it up. This is all politics. We need to be worrying about the victims in this thing, and we need to worry about justice and these dirt bags that were involved with these kids, and we need to publicly ridicule them and possibly hang them. But the reality is there probably isn't a list. You know, I've known a few criminals in my life. Heck, I've served in elected office with a few of them, and they don't keep a list of their criminal activities. And Trump's not on this list, because if he was, Biden would have released it the first day. So it's a lot of politics and a lot of hype. We just need to get to the bottom of it, ma'am. And unfortunately, in this town, when it's delayed, it's kind of like the Kennedy assassination. We're never going to get to the bottom of it.
Well, of course, we don't know who's on the list. And to your point, right, list is a euphemism, right, for knowing who Jeffrey Epstein was dealing with, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Who was sleeping with underage girls, who was financing all of those things we don't know.
No, let's correct that. Let me correct you on. Wait, ma'am, let me correct you on something. Who was raping underage girls? You do not have sex with an underage girl, ma'am. You rape them, and that is what this is about. So, we try to soften that, but that was a horrible act of violence against these young
Well, I
women.
agree with you.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with you, and I happen to agree that we should know every single person involved. Do you think that Pam Bondi is listening to you at this moment, Congressman, that there's any chance that she's going to release the files, and in a way that you would have confidence on what's in those files?
I don't have a lot of confidence in her, ma'am. I think she's way out over her skis in this thing. She released that notebook, which was stuff that you and I would already know. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she didn't follow it. I think she took some bad advice. She's in the prime time, gets thrown in the middle of it, and I think she took some bad advice. But then when she followed it up with the list on my desk, and then there is no list, I get tired of that. One thing I think people ought to wonder about, though, is these flight logs, which are generally public record, but that doesn't necessarily mean somebody's a pedophile. That's why I think we need somebody in the legal community to oversee this, to make sure none of the kids' rights are violated. We don't want to see pictures of children. We don't want their identification, anybody that was abused. But if the person is suspected of a crime, dadgummit, we ought to have that information, and that's what it should always be about.
So I know that you have wanted to have Ghislaine Maxwell testify before Congress. And of course, while Jeffrey Epstein died before his trial, she is serving 20 years for her role in assisting him.
Yeah.
So have you gotten a response, Congressman Burchett, from the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, or from leadership saying that they're willing to hear from the one person who actually could answer all these questions?
I haven't yet, ma'am. I need to run into Chairman Comer. I haven't seen him yet in the last couple of days, but and you can call me Tim, by the way. But I don't think Comer's going to duck me out on this one. He's going to do what's right. He's a stand-up guy on these types of issues. He's a family man as well, like I am. So I think he's there. You know, ultimately, though, ma'am, I'm going to have to answer to my creator on this issue. It's not the voters or even the president. You know, as a Christian, I'm not a very good one, obviously. I'm on the far end of the forgiven spectrum, but the Bible talks about how you treat the least amongst you, and that's Jesus talking, and that's some pretty strong medicine right there, ma'am. The least amongst us definitely are these children, and we need to get to the bottom of this, because first of all, we need to send a message to these godless dirtbags that abuse children that we're not going to stand for it. And second of all, we need to send a message to all the victims in the world, in this country anyway, that we are out there fighting for you. I've held the hands of people that have been molested and abused, and ma'am, they have a life sentence. They never get over it. Lifetime of counseling, guilt, horrible things. They do horrible things to their bodies, and it is just it's a horrendous thing. I passed some of the toughest laws in the country when I was in the state legislature. I know all about this issue.
We start tonight with the scandal consuming the Trump White House as MAGA leaders, top Democrats, and nonpartisan journalists demand answers about the Epstein Files. This is new and dangerous territory for Donald Trump, as for the first time, he appears unable to control his own base. This morning, D.C. woke up to headlines like these. MAGA revolt. Trump discovers MAGA has no off switch. Trump and MAGA are no longer the same thing. Images of MAGA supporters literally burning their red MAGA hats are going viral online. And all of this comes a day after Trump berated Republicans as, quote, stupid and foolish for wanting more information about the disgraced financier who died by suicide while in federal custody. Today, Trump's secretary was bombarded with Epstein questions at this press conference.
Does the president believe that justice has been served in the Epstein case?
Does he have knowledge or an understanding of what is in the files related to Epstein that have not been released?
Has the White House been directly in touch with some of the MAGA influencers that are still not satisfied?
The president said that he floated the idea of a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. Can you confirm that?
Do you know what the president's reaction was to Mike Johnson saying that he wants additional files released? Was there a conversation with Mike Johnson about that following his comments?
There's been a lot of discussion about the Epstein files and the president's comments yesterday calling it a hoax. Can you clarify which part of the Epstein hoax is the hoax part?
An absolute barrage of questions with no relief in sight. Politico writes this, quote, Trump is like a magician who has locked himself in a straitjacket, only to find that he's lost his ability to maneuver out of it and finds his audience turning on him. Among those now speaking out are Trump's former vice president, Mike Pence, as well as top GOP senators and the MAGA broadcasters.
I think the time has come for the administration to release all of the files regarding Jeffrey Epstein's investigation and prosecution.
Maybe I'm just getting old and forgetting things, but I could have sworn that we had people campaigning, and if I get elected, we're going to release the files, right?
Yeah.
So
yes.
Release the damn files. Get over it.
It's the administration and their handling of this, which is why everyone's talking about it. It didn't have to be handled this way. It's been abysmal.
I am trying to get you to take the political gun out of your mouth. You already blown both your feet off. And now you got it shoved in your mouth. I'm like, will you please take that out of your mouth? You're like, shut up. Don't talk about it. You have put the gun in your mouth and ours collectively. Stop it. Stop it.
And in a rare display of bipartisanship, top Democrats have also gotten in on the act, hammering Trump on the Epstein question.
For years, Donald Trump and the MAGA movement have railed on about the Epstein files. But now, a complete reversal. Trump is straight up gaslighting the American public.
The president had run on a campaign with a promise to expose the Epstein files. Now he and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, say, nope, nothing to investigate. When it comes to Epstein and sex trafficking, all these claims are just ludicrous.
Amid these calls for greater transparency, there's also new scrutiny on an unexplained move from the Trump DOJ. Maureen Comey, the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey, was until recently a longtime federal prosecutor who worked on a number of high-profile cases, including the prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's associate. This week, Trump's DOJ fired her. Critics say it appears to be an effort to intimidate perceived enemies. Today, in a farewell email to her colleagues, Comey said that the DOJ letter informing her of her termination provided no reason for her discharge. In the email, which MSNBC has obtained, Comey issued a sharp warning to her colleagues in the Southern District of New York, saying, quote, if a career prosecutor can be fired without reason, fear may seep into the decisions of those who remain. Do not let that happen. Fear is the tool of a tyrant wielded to suppress independent thought. Instead of fear, let this moment fuel the fire that already burns at the heart of this place, a fire of righteous indignation at abuses of power, of commitment to seek justice for victims, of dedication to truth above all else. And that is where we start tonight. Donald Trump under fire from the MAGA base amid broader warnings about a presidential power grab. Joining me now is Barrett Berger, a former federal prosecutor from the Southern District of New York, and Aisha Mills, political strategist and former resident fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School of Politics. Aisha, you saw Donald Trump's press secretary faced with a barrage of questions over the Epstein files. Why can't Donald Trump figure out how to defuse this bomb?
Because Donald Trump doesn't want to. I mean, here's the thing. I just want to acknowledge for everybody who's watching this that we have literally been on like a week and a half distraction from what's really going on in America right now. Donald Trump is gutting the government. They literally just rescinded $9 billion in foreign aid. They're trying to shut down public broadcasting. They're taking Medicare from people, Medicaid from people. And here's where we are, is we're talking about this. We know that Donald Trump doesn't actually care about the victims, about those poor girls who are human trafficked. I think right now we need to be focusing on actually the victims of this and trying to get justice for them. And that's not something that Donald Trump is ever going to talk about. Ever.
I don't disagree, but he is losing his base over this. Like, there are folks in the MAGA faithful who are angry and they are baying for blood. Barrett, do you think the DOJ actually has more information than they're letting on here, and that there's something to these calls for transparency?
Well, I'm sure the DOJ has, thousands and thousands of pages of information that they produced in discovery. But the problem is not all information is sufficient to be released to the public. Here you're going to have hours and hours of child pornography that was captured on these recordings. You're going to have information that identifies victim, that gives personal stuff about them. You're going to have information that was gained through judicial process, like a grand jury, that simply cannot be disclosed according to law. So I think the big problem we have here is one of an explanation. Explaining exactly why certain things can't be released, what the basis is. It may not satisfy people who've really had their hearts set on getting their hands on this, but just because they can't see it doesn't mean they should.
Well, that's a great question, Aisha. So there's a lot of information here for lots of different reasons. Much of it likely cannot be released, but we are seeing people online burning their MAGA hats. And these are people who are deeply with the president. It seems like they would be receptive to an explanation, any explanation from this man whom they revere. Why won't this just go away? Why can't they give the explanation?
Well, listen, I think that Donald Trump, well, we all know, actually, let me not, say, I think Donald Trump is guilty of a variety of things and hasn't been held accountable for them, period. What his base does and our distraction with that is literally that. What I'm interested in, be it Republican or be it Democrat, is why isn't anybody talking about the fact that if they were so riled up about this Epstein case and getting justice for these victims, why is Donald Trump defunding, literally just completely dismantled the Violence Against Women Act? And completely defunded all support for people who have been trafficked, for human trafficking. There's so much that could actually happen that would be with regards to policy that would actually support and protect people that we could be talking about. And right now it just feels more like a political circus that I don't think is going anywhere.
So, Barrett, this is a political circus, and it actually doesn't feel like Donald Trump is necessarily in the middle of it. The one person who does seem to be getting the brunt of all of this is Attorney General Pamela Jo Bondi. How much trouble is she in from this base that's calling for her ouster?
Seemingly a lot. It seems like she still has the support of the president, but as we know, you have the support of the president until you don't. And right, too anxious, but the fact that anyone who actually cares about protecting victims and standing up for them and doing something about sex trafficking, the person who cared the most about doing that was the person they just fired. Maureen Comey, more than anyone else, was somebody who not only, talked the talk of wanting to protect victims, but spent the last decade doing the hard work to do that. Not just in the Epstein case, but as we just saw over the last 2 months in the Combs case. This is somebody who's dedicated...
This is the P. Diddy trial.
Correct. Yeah. So this is somebody who has just dedicated her career to standing up for victims, to doing the work that people are talking about. And the fact that they've fired her while also saying we care about this is just wildly inconsistent.
And keep in mind that this president has spent most of his life trying to avoid accountability for the things that he's done against women. So here we are.
Well, let's go to Maureen Comey. Barrett, what do you make of this? This seems to be a very unusual step, an unorthodox step, to fire a career prosecutor who has never had any complaints about her performance, but she also happens to be the daughter of someone who has, even in the last couple of months, been the target of a lot of ribbing from the Trump loyalists. What's actually going on here?
I mean, on one hand, it seems very consistent with the pattern that we've seen. We've seen plenty of not only DOJ folks being fired, but, you know, across the government, we've seen sort of these widespread. This one's different because it is so individually targeted to her with really no connection to her actual work as a prosecutor, at least what we know so far. I mean, it seems like from her resignation email, this was totally unexpected from her, and the letter gives no explanation other than, you know, citing to Article 2, which is just, you know, the executive's, I guess, authority to do so, but really gives no analysis or rationale for this. Right. This is really, it feels just so personal. And I said before, it just, to me, strikes me more because of her last name than anything that she has ever done as a prosecutor.
As a former prosecutor yourself, what do you make of her farewell email to her colleagues at the Southern District of New York?
It was a wonderful email. It was, you know, very righteous, talked a lot about what everyone, not just in the Southern District, but I think throughout U.S. attorneys' offices in the country, what we sort of embodied, which was this idea of prosecuting cases without fear or favor.
And the Southern District, that has been its credo for a long time, the sovereign district of New York.
And you need that ethos because what you're doing is prosecuting people regardless of their political party. You know, the Southern District of New York has brought cases against Republicans as often as it's brought cases against Democrats. It's brought cases against powerful people and people with no power. So they really live up to this credo. And the fact that she cites that and really seems to be saying this is now in jeopardy is pretty striking.
MAGA is eating itself alive over Jeffrey Epstein. So is Donald Trump himself for dessert? Joining us now, former Republican congressman and author of The Breach, The Untold Story of the Investigation into January 6th, Denver Riggleman, managing editor of The Bulwark and MSNBC contributor Sam Stein, and senior reporter for The Bulwark and author of Trust the Plan, The Rise of QAnon and the Conspiracy That Reshaped the World, Will Sommer. Will, this fever swamp is the one that you dwell in most, so I'm going to stick with you on this. Why is the Epstein Files saga, why is it so sticky? Why can't Donald Trump just push his way out of it?
I mean, I think it's very evocative. I think unlike maybe other moments where he's disappointed the base, like, let's say, going to war with Iran, it's something that really sticks with people. I mean, it's about a pedophile network, you know, at least in the real world, there is some amount of truth to that. And then they've taken that and run with it and made it far crazier. And as a result, more emotionally touching to them. And so people expected to get, you know, justice as they saw it. I mean, they thought a lot of Democrats were going to go to prison. They thought this was going to be this huge moment for them. And then for Trump to then turn everything around and say, yeah, no, we're not doing that at all. And actually, you're a weakling if you believed any of that. I mean, it's upsetting.
It's upsetting, but how upsetting is it going to be, Will? I mean, when we look at Alex Jones saying that Donald Trump might be complicit, when we see Nick Fuentes, I mean, these are obviously not upstanding figures in American life. But we see Nick Fuentes going after Donald Trump in the way that he did, or you see Megyn Kelly try to couch it by saying, I'm still a Trump supporter, but I don't trust them. How long does this survive? How much damage is it going to do to the MAGA base? And does that damage that extend to Donald Trump?
I think it's a big deal. I mean, I think we're seeing, as you said, people on the fringe like Alex Jones, Nick Fuentes, but even people who are pretty close to the White House, like the people who got those Epstein binders a few months ago that turned out to be such a debacle. Even they realize like they're kind of stuck between Trump and the audience, and they're starting to attack Trump over it too. And so when you see those people who are saying that, I mean, I think they can see which way the wind is blowing, and the base is really upset about this. I mean, I was watching one podcaster who said, I mean, this is like the worst Trump has been with the base in 10 years. I mean, people are mad about it.
Denver, is this the dog that caught the car?
Yeah, well, this is crazy eating its own tail, you know, and we saw this in January 6th. By the way, that was the best beginning of any show I've ever seen. I was laughing at the whole thing. So here's the thing, right? When you lose the nutters, the conspiracy theorists, and the neo-Nazis, you're losing a huge base of the MAGA voting party. This is about spiritual warfare. And when you're talking about the Epstein files, you know, it's been this rationalization of how do we get over the pictures of Donald Trump with this? How do we get over that he's been, adjudicated for sexual abuse? How do we get over all the things he's been accused of? Well, we've had Republicans, GOP, and MAGA telling us for years that the truth was going to come out. And Trump runs on this exposing the deep state and the globalists. It's this conspiracy theory baseline. And that's really how policy is made in this administration. It's about conspiracy theories. And, obviously, Will's an expert on QAnon. I've had the good fortune of looking at the QAnoners that were going on January 6th and what they believed in when they attacked the Capitol. And I had the pleasure of being attacked by QAnon after I officiated a same-sex wedding. So I think what you're seeing right now, when you see Nick Fuentes and you see Alex Jones, you see Ben Shapiro, you see Megyn Kelly, this is actually real. I have never seen, I think Will's right too, I haven't seen in my time where there's something that the Democrats, independents, right, and I would say the moderate right can run on than this issue right here. It should be brought up every single day, because if these are not released, this is the biggest deal for Trump because he can't protect what he's been accused of, and it destroys the conspiracy theory base going forward.
Let me just read a few things here, so bear with me. I was reminded of this today. Donald Trump spoke to New York Magazine in 2002 for a Jeffrey Epstein profile. And here's what he said. I'm going to read it because it's important. I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do. And many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life. So Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein go back enough, and we're close enough to where a New York Magazine writer would call Donald Trump to get a quote on him, and that's what he said. Mick Mulvaney, Donald Trump's ex-chief of staff, was speaking to Al Jazeera and said this to Al Jazeera recently. He's in the files. A lot of people are in the files. But if anything damning was in the files about Trump, the Biden administration would have released them. Fine, fair point. And then you have the New York Times writing this about the MAGA supporters. This is by Sean McCreish. Natalie Winters, the War Room correspondent and 24-year-old protege of Stephen K. Bannon, told the New York Times that Epstein goes to the very foundation of MAGA, and added, quote, I just think it's frankly very grifty to have spent your entire career promoting, even if it weren't the Epstein thing directly, but the idea that there is this deep state, the idea that there is this unelected class of, bankers, corporations, countries, intel agencies, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, you have the power to expose it. And either you're not because there's nothing there, in which case it makes you a liar, and I don't believe that, or you're ineffective, or you're compromised. What I'm surprised by, Sam, is, and this is why I asked, is Donald Trump for dessert? If there's any there surrounding Jeffrey Epstein and powerful people, I mean, Donald Trump has got to be at the top of that list. We have so many pictures of him with Jeffrey Epstein. There's so much history between the two of them. You have that quote of Donald Trump saying Jeffrey Epstein likes them on the younger side. If the conspiracy is that the powerful people are protecting Jeffrey Epstein or hiding the files because they don't want to be implicated, how has Donald Trump himself been able to escape scrutiny? And is it coming back to him now? Is he finally going to be scrutinized by his own base?
All right. Well, at the risk of undermining myself, let me just preface this by saying I've learned all I'm about to say from Will Sommer and from the work that he's done for the Bulwark. Not saying you should direct the question to Will, but my guess is that if Will were to answer this question, he'd say part of the issue here is that Trump has stoked these conspiracies forever, but also that he plays a central role in the conspiracy. Forever, for years, the QAnon base has basically assumed that Trump would be the one who exposed this great cabal deep state pedophiliacs, and that Trump was pictured with Epstein and knew Epstein not because they were friends necessarily, but because he was put there for some larger purpose to unravel that deep state, to unravel that great cabal. What's disconcerting to them now, I suppose, is not that Trump is exposed as being connected to Epstein. We all saw those pictures a long time ago. We've read that quote from New York Magazine in 2002. We saw the weird photo, as we're seeing now, the video of them dancing and, biting their upper lips in an awkward way. It's that Trump won't follow through on the idea of transparency. And he's acting in this incredibly erratic way when asked about this stuff that, frankly, and I think objectively, raises the question, is he hiding something? If he wants to, because all of this is supposed to culminate in some great moment of transparency, Trump now stands in the way of that. And so this is no longer necessarily a political problem for him. In a way, it's kind of a spiritual problem. I mean, this is an article of faith for MAGA. It's an article of faith for QAnon. And that is being supremely tested by Donald Trump right now. And that's why I think the congressman and Will and myself all conclude that this is a uniquely treacherous moment for him politically.
Do the supporters start to question whether they were misled by Donald Trump and his supporters? That maybe they were lied to? You saw Nick Fuentes say that this was all a big scam. You hear it from Natalie Winters, although she says she doesn't believe it. Is the end of this that they look at the Trump administration, the people that he put in charge, as a bunch of opportunists who were using them to get into power, who were willing to feed them anything to get back into office, Will? Or Sam?
Yeah. No, I was going to direct that to Will because he's got a great piece on this about the
I'm going to have the control room just take both Denver and Will and just squish it together, and then we'll just say, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Will, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're starting to see some evidence of that. I mean, in the case of QAnon conspiracy theories, often it's something that people know really in their heart, and they realize, oh my gosh, that's false. What else is wrong? And then they kind of come out of QAnon. In this case, I mean, we're seeing right-wing commentators and just sort of average people on the street who are posting on the internet saying, wait a minute, like, this is insulting to my intelligence that Trump is just telling me, get over it, a few months after J.D. Vance was talking about Epstein. Suddenly, now that's for idiots. And people are starting to get kind of upset about it. And this idea that, like, it's an insult to my intelligence, they must think I'm an idiot. I think that has the potential to really get people to turn on Trump more broadly.
What about the idea that they just keep believing it, Denver? Donald Trump says there's no there, and there is no there, but they say, you know what, I don't believe you, that there's no end to this. There's no, like, what would a resolution look like to people who believe this conspiracy theory?
There is none. There's no resolution if he doesn't release it. And here's why. So I had people come up and scream at me like, Jean Carroll was lying. Wait till you see the Epstein files. You got to remember, I own whiskey distilleries, right? I'm all over the country. And Will is a QAnon expert. My unique expertise is being attacked by QAnon and have to go against them. So it's pretty cool, right? I think that all of us are on this show right now. But the issue that you have is when somebody comes in now and if they have no way to defend Donald Trump from all his accusations and from his adjudicated case, if he doesn't release the Epstein list or Epstein files, it's completely transparent. Spiritual warfare, the fact this is a spiritual tenet, which you've heard on here, the fact that this is an article of faith, this is the cascading effect of conspiracy theories that undermines the very administration that ran on conspiracy theories. And there comes a point when crazy can't be rationalized out because it's those very conspiracy theories that are driving the administration. And I'm telling you, there are people who are virulent Trump supporters, virulent. And, I ran as a Republican, Katie, right? They'll come to me like, I can't believe it. Maybe they were they lying? Denver, you know a lot. What's going on? I'm like, hey, maybe if they don't release the list or the files, maybe there's something there. Maybe he was lying about Jean Carroll. And
but even if they did release the files, would that be sufficient? I mean, if they release all the files, what would need to be in them in order to put this to rest?
They're going to redact a lot of the files. So as soon as you have redactions, and I think we'll say we're going to laugh at this, as soon as you see redactions, they're going to say, what's behind the black line? Oh, my God, it's a cover-up from the deep state. Again, there's no way out if people actually can approach us in a way where they understand how these conspiracy theories work.
Which is
Well, as the world now knows, the breaking news of the night is that Donald Trump is sinking deeper and deeper into the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, with reporting from the Wall Street Journal tonight describing a birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein on the occasion of Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday. The Wall Street Journal says the letter bears Trump's name. And that letter's final line says, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." And Donald Trump's latest panic response to what is now a fully out of control situation for the Trump administration is a post on social media within the last hour saying, "I have asked Attorney General Pam Bondi to produce any and all pertinent grand jury testimony subject to court approval." It is entirely possible that the court will not approve the release of any of the grand jury testimony in the case because Jeffrey Epstein's co-defendant and convicted co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, is still an active litigant in the case, appealing her conviction, and the grand jury testimony was used in the prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell. If she's successful in that appeal, she could have a retrial that could include some of that grand jury material. A judge might want to protect all of that. And the Epstein files that people want to see, that Trump supporters have demanded to see for years, include much, much more than grand jury testimony. It includes FBI reports, FBI notes, prosecutors' notes, endless streams of paper far beyond just grand jury transcripts. And the Attorney General knows that. And that's why Pam Bondi responded to Donald Trump on social media saying, quote, "President Trump, we are ready to move the court tomorrow to unseal the grand jury transcripts." And that won't do it. That will not quiet the revolt in Trump world about this. Because with the publication of that story by the Wall Street Journal, Donald Trump has now sunk to the lowest point in his presidency, because this story, and only this story, has separated Donald Trump from some of his most fervent and frenzied supporters in the past, who are now in a frenzy of outrage about Donald Trump blocking the release of the Epstein files, which, according to the Wall Street Journal, contained that birthday message bearing Trump's name to Jeffrey Epstein. In 2003, when Jeffrey Epstein was, according to criminal evidence developed years later, routinely raping children, especially 14-year-old girls, which was apparently the target age for Jeffrey Epstein in the selection of his victims, that's when this letter was addressed to a child rapist bearing Donald Trump's name that said, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." In the middle of what we now know was Jeffrey Epstein's dedicated pursuit of child rape victims. That was Jeffrey Epstein's biggest secret at the time. We don't know what the secret the letter is referring to. We don't know if Donald Trump knew that Jeffrey Epstein was an unrelenting, predatory child rapist at the time that Donald Trump was friendly with Jeffrey Epstein, to the point that Jeffrey Epstein described Donald Trump then as his closest friend. You know how much trouble a politician is in when stories like this break? Not that there's ever been a story like this, but when scandals break, you know how much trouble a politician's in by the reactions to the story. There are several people mentioned in the Wall Street Journal report. Donald Trump is just one of them. Other people mentioned in that report include Jeffrey Epstein's former lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, and Jeffrey Epstein's largest financial benefactor, billionaire Leslie Wexner. No one mentioned in the Wall Street Journal report tonight disputes anything in the report except Donald Trump. There is a letter in that same collection of birthday letters from Alan Dershowitz and another one from Leslie Wexner. When reached by the Wall Street Journal, Alan Dershowitz said, quote, "It's been a long time and I don't recall the content of what I may have written." Billionaire Leslie Wexner quote, declined to comment through a spokesman. So no dispute from them about the reporting on them and their birthday letters to Jeffrey Epstein, reporting by the Wall Street Journal tonight. The Wall Street Journal reports about the documents, which NBC News has not independently verified. Ghislaine Maxwell's collected letters from Trump and dozens of Epstein's other associates for a 2003 birthday album, according to documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Pages from the leather-bound album, assembled before Epstein was first arrested in 2006, are among the documents examined by Justice Department officials who investigated Epstein and Maxwell years ago, according to people who have reviewed the pages. It's unclear if any of the pages are part of the Trump administration's recent review. The Justice Department, run by Donald Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi, has control of the entirety of the Epstein files, including the Epstein birthday material quoted by the Wall Street Journal. The Justice Department officials didn't respond to requests for comment or addressed questions about whether the Trump page and other pages of the birthday album were part of the agency's recent documents review. The FBI declined to comment. So the Justice Department does not dispute one word of the Wall Street Journal reporting tonight. The FBI does not dispute one word of the Wall Street Journal reporting tonight, not one word. In Alan Dershowitz's birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein, he made a joke about Bill Clinton. The Wall Street Journal report tonight says, quote, Trump, along with others, including Clinton, also appeared several times on flight logs for Epstein's private jet. A spokesman for Clinton referred to a 2019 statement that former President Clinton had cut off ties more than a decade before Epstein's second arrest and didn't know about Epstein's alleged crimes. So Bill Clinton, another person mentioned in the Wall Street Journal reporting tonight, does not dispute a word of the Wall Street Journal reporting. The only person mentioned in the Wall Street Journal reporting tonight who is disputing that reporting is Donald Trump. Here is the Wall Street Journal's description of that birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein. The letter bearing Trump's name, which was reviewed by the Journal, is bawdy, like others in the album. It contains several lines of typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, which appears to be hand-drawn with a heavy marker. A pair of small arcs denotes the woman's breasts, and the future president's signature is a squiggly Donald below her waist, mimicking pubic hair. The letter concludes, happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. In an interview with the Journal on Tuesday evening, Trump denied writing the letter or drawing the picture. This is not me. This is a fake thing. It's a fake Wall Street Journal story. He said, I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women, he said. It's not my language. It's not my words. He told the Journal he was preparing to file a lawsuit if it published an article. I'm going to sue the Wall Street Journal just like I sued everyone else, he said. The Journal offered a full description of the birthday letter without reproducing a copy of the birthday letter in their reporting. Inside, the reporting says, inside the outline of the naked woman was a typewritten note styled as an imaginary conversation between Trump and Epstein, written in the third person. Voiceover. There must be more to life than having everything, the note began. Donald. Yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey. Nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald. We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey. Yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald. Enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey. As a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Donald. A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. The year before that 2003 letter was written, Donald Trump supplied this quote to New York Magazine for a profile of Jeffrey Epstein. I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life. His social life led to criminal charges in Florida, for which he made a sweetheart deal with Florida prosecutors, and then years later, federal charges of sex trafficking in New York, which led to Jeffrey Epstein's death in federal prison during Donald Trump's first presidency, with Donald Trump's administration in complete control of federal prisons. In the first year of the Trump presidency, the first Trump presidency, Jeffrey Epstein told Trump biographer Michael Wolff in a recorded interview, quote, "I was Donald's closest friend for 10 years. The Trump White House reaction to this story tonight has been chaotic and continues to be chaotic. At 8:33 p.m., Donald Trump posted on social media his threat, and only his threat, it's just a threat, to sue the Wall Street Journal, saying the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch personally were warned directly by President Donald J. Trump that the supposed letter they printed by President Trump to Epstein was a fake, and if they print it, they will be sued. Mr. Murdoch stated that he would take care of it, but obviously did not have the power to do so. The editor of the Wall Street Journal, Emma Tucker, was told directly by Caroline Leavitt and by President Trump that the letter was a fake, but Emma Tucker didn't want to hear that. Instead, they are going with a false, malicious, and defamatory story anyway. President Trump will be suing the Wall Street Journal, News Corp, and Mr. Murdoch shortly. Donald Trump has issued an uncountable number of threats to sue people who he has then chosen not to sue. Rupert Murdoch has the power to stop the Wall Street Journal from publishing anything. Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal facing a lawsuit threat from Donald Trump and going forward with their reporting is a very strong statement by them in their own confidence in the Wall Street Journal's reporting. Before Donald Trump posted that on social media tonight, his vice president got out ahead of Donald Trump on social media and said something that Donald Trump refused to say in his own social media post. What J.D. Vance wrote tonight could be his first big move to become the next president of the United States without waiting for the next election, because what J.D. Vance wrote tonight adds fuel to the fire burning in Trump world about the Epstein files, which now will burn all the hotter because of the Wall Street Journal's reporting tonight. J.D. Vance said what could be the most harmful thing anyone on the Trump team could say tonight. In his social media post, J.D. Vance used Donald Trump's new favorite form of public presidential profanity in J.D. Vance's best imitation of Donald Trump. J.D. Vance wrote, "Forgive my language, but this story is complete and utter bullcrap. The Wall Street Journal should be ashamed for publishing it. Where is the letter? Would you be shocked to learn they never showed it to us before publishing it? Does anyone honestly believe this sounds like Donald Trump?" And in another post, J.D. Vance wrote, "Doesn't it violate some rule of journalistic ethics to publish a letter like this without showing it to the victim of this hit piece?" The answer is no. It does not violate journalistic ethics. And the worst thing that can happen to Donald Trump is for the Wall Street Journal or anyone else to release publicly a copy of that letter. The worst thing that could happen to Donald Trump is exactly what his vice president, J.D. Vance, is demanding tonight. J.D. Vance, the person who would move up to the presidency if this issue becomes so difficult that it drives Donald Trump out of the presidency through impeachment or resignation. We have seen this happen to a president before, and Donald Trump has never been weaker. And J.D. Vance of all people, is saying, show us the letter, demanding to see the letter. Donald Trump did not dare to say, where is the letter, in his social media post tonight, which occurred 40 minutes after J.D. Vance's social media post tonight. Donald Trump is not asking to see that letter. Donald Trump doesn't want you to see that letter. But J.D. Vance wants you to see that letter. If J.D. Vance creates a groundswell demand by more and more Trump supporters for the release of that letter, that could do more damage to Donald Trump than anything that has ever happened to Donald Trump in his entire political career. And it's J.D. Vance who's doing this. Once again tonight in Donald Trump's public comments about Jeffrey Epstein, who he used to call a terrific guy, Donald Trump portrayed himself as a victim and only himself. In Donald Trump's mind, he's the only victim in this story, and as usual, he does not have one word of sympathy tonight to offer Jeffrey Epstein's real victims. And I'm going to read to you the words of just one of Jeffrey Epstein's 14-year-old victims from an interview she gave in 2019 after Jeffrey Epstein was arrested by then the Trump Justice Department during the Trump presidency, which is when the Epstein Files were created. I will not mention her name tonight or show the video of the interview that she did so as not to subject her to that pain. She was asked, "Did Jeffrey Epstein rape you?" She said, "He raped me, forcefully raped me, and knew exactly what he was doing, and I don't think he cared. What hurts even more is that if I wasn't afraid to come forward sooner, then maybe he wouldn't have done it to other girls. I feel really guilty to this day. I feel really guilty." That's a feeling Donald Trump has never had. He has never felt guilty about anything. He's never felt really guilty. He doesn't know what that feeling is. 14-year-old girls raped by Jeffrey Epstein suffered and suffered again and suffered again, and Donald Trump cannot bring himself tonight to offer them a word of sympathy as their experiences are flashing back to them in a world that will now be saturated with coverage of Jeffrey Epstein. Those 14-year-old girls suffered the unspeakable experience of rape, and then they suffered from their own feelings about it afterward. And many of them have suffered, as they've said, from feeling guilty. One of them, whose suffering never stopped, took her own life just 3 months ago, even after receiving funds from a victim compensation fund set up using Jeffrey Epstein's vast wealth. The money was no compensation for the suffering. Imagine what those girls felt when they read Donald Trump in New York Magazine saying Jeffrey Epstein is a terrific guy. The 14-year-old girl whose account of being raped by Jeffrey Epstein I just read to you was raped by Jeffrey Epstein in the same year that Donald Trump told New York Magazine that Jeffrey Epstein is a terrific guy. And yes, this story is about a stunning turn in American politics. And yes, this story is about a president of the United States. Yes, this story is about a child rapist who died in federal prison while Donald Trump's administration was in control of all federal prisons. But the power of this story to bring down Donald Trump does not come from the Wall Street Journal. It does not come from Rupert Murdoch. The power of this story to bring down Donald Trump does not come from the Trump fanatics who are now turning against Donald Trump tonight. The power of this story comes from those children, those 14-year-old girls whose suffering at the hands of that predator who Donald Trump called a terrific guy never ends. Well, imagine a 78-year-old man who often speaks incoherently and lies to you in ways that leave you wondering whether he is a pathological liar or delusional or both, pocket dials someone he doesn't want to talk to at 1:28 a.m. And then imagine that same 78-year-old man is angrily braying at the world at 5:24 a.m., claiming people have committed crimes that do not exist, and coming up with a name for those people committing the crimes that don't exist, using words that have never been joined together and make absolutely no sense, calling them, quote, negative criminals. Of course you would be concerned about the mental health of such a person. Of course you would assume some kind of serious neurological decline in the 78-year-old man. Imagine that same 78-year-old man also said, I run the country and the world. And now, imagine if Joe Biden had done just one of those things. There would have been 4-inch headlines about cognitive decline. But that's just one news cycle with Donald Trump, who did every one of those things. He butt-dialed a reporter for The Atlantic at 1:28 a.m. who he did not want to talk to, but with whom he did eventually do an interview in which he said, I run the country and the world. No one runs the country. No one ever has. No one ever will. This country was founded on that very principle. This country was founded by people escaping the rule of one person, escaping the rule of a king. And so, no, the president does not run the country. The president, at best, if he knows what he's doing, runs a section and only a section of the federal government, the executive branch. The president of the United States has absolutely nothing to do with thousands upon thousands of state laws that exist in this country and city laws and all of the different state tax rates that exist in this country. People have tried to run the world, people like Adolf Hitler, but no one ever has. And so, no, Donald Trump does not run the country and the world. And it sounds fully delusional when he says it in an interview with The Atlantic, which now carries that line as the title of the piece. I run the country and the world. Some Republicans have tried to justify that delusional declaration by invoking the concept of the President of the United States as the leader of the free world. That is a cliche that I have never personally indulged in, but it really is just a cliche, and it's never actually been true. And no previous president, all of whom since Franklin Delano Roosevelt have at some point been referred to in the media as the leader of the free world, has never claimed that title for himself. No president has ever done that, because every previous president who actually tried to lead other countries in one direction or another always knew that the easiest way to destroy a president's ability to lead other countries in this world, to cooperate with us, would be a publicly expressed sense of American presidential superiority over all of those countries and over all of those leaders of those countries who the American president might be trying to persuade. And so Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who brilliantly managed the allied countries who won World War II, and Joe Biden, who brilliantly managed the alliance of countries who have rushed to the support of Ukraine, always publicly did that kind of leadership with humility, because that's the only way. The man who says, I run the world, is being rebuked literally by the world right now and every single day since he has imposed tariffs on the world. Not one country has accepted those tariffs. Not one country isn't fighting back against those tariffs. And China, the principal target of the Trump tariffs, through a government spokesperson said, we will fight till the end. That's how much Donald Trump does not run the world. Donald Trump started a trade war that he is losing every day. Donald Trump could not have chosen a stupider or more delusional moment to say, I run the country and the world. As of tonight, new polling indicates the country doesn't want Donald Trump running anything now. Donald Trump has achieved a new record, and all of Donald Trump's records are the most extreme form of negative achievement. A new Washington Post poll awards a record to Donald Trump, reporting that Donald Trump's job approval rating is, quote, lower than for any past president at the 100-day mark in their first or second terms. Donald Trump is now America's biggest loser in the history of first 100-day presidential polling. 55% say they disapprove of how Donald Trump is handling his job, and only 39% approve. Donald Trump won 49% of the vote in the last election, but he couldn't come close to that now. The only comfort for Donald Trump in this week's new round of polling is that the richest person in the world polls just slightly worse than Donald Trump. 57% disapprove of what Elon Musk is doing, with just 35% approving. Americans think that the Trump-invented so-called Department of Government Efficiency, allegedly run by Elon Musk, isn't finding waste or fraud in government. 56% say that waste has either stayed the same or has increased, compared to 43% who think it has decreased. And 68% say that fraud has either stayed the same or has increased. Donald Trump, speaking of fraud, is the first president of the United States to try to hustle private business ventures from the White House and do it publicly, auctioning off for money that he can put in his pocket, not for campaign contributions, dinners at the White House, creating his own cryptocurrency coin business. No president has ever tried to profit from the presidency while in the White House. 59% expressed concern that Donald Trump is doing too much to reduce the size and role of government, with 56% saying correctly that Donald Trump acted beyond his authority as president without justification. That's what's happening in the country that Donald Trump says he runs. 56% are saying Donald Trump is trying to act beyond his authority as president, and that 56% understand that no one is supposed to run this country. That is not the definition of the presidency that a majority of this country correctly embraces, or that the Constitution provides for. Donald Trump does run his private businesses. He still does every day. He runs them for profit from the White House, but he does not run the country, and he absolutely does not run the world. It's not just every other country in the world that knows how harmful the Trump tariffs are. A huge majority of Americans know that. 64% disapprove of Donald Trump's tariffs. The Washington Post calls it one of the least popular issues so far in Trump's presidency. 64% of the people in this country know that Donald Trump's tariffs are a very bad idea. 72% say they think it's very or somewhat likely that his economic policies will cause a recession. 72% say Donald Trump is on his way to causing a recession, and it's very, very hard in modern American politics to get polling numbers like 72% on anything. And it is virtually impossible to get polling numbers like 89%. Only something as obviously deranged as the Trump tariffs could produce that kind of number in a poll. 89% think the Trump tariffs are likely to result in higher prices on the products they buy. 89% are saying in that poll they know Donald Trump lied every single time he told them during the presidential campaign that China would pay his tariffs. 89% are saying they know Donald Trump was lying when he said the tariffs that he will impose will be paid by Canada and paid by Mexico and by all the foreign countries he illegally imposes tariffs on. claiming that it's a national security issue, which it obviously isn't. Tonight, 89% know the man who claims to run the country and the world is completely wrong about who actually pays the Trump tariffs. They understand exactly what all those radio and TV ads from car dealers are about, telling them to rush in to get the pre-tariff price on a new car. And they know time is running out or has run out for that pre-tariff price. And they're going to pay that tariff if they buy a new car. At 5:24 a.m. today, the man who thinks he runs the country and the world reacted to the Washington Post poll by, of course, attacking the poll and calling the people who conduct the poll, quote, his words, negative criminals. Donald Trump said, these people should be investigated for election fraud. They are negative criminals. And so, as ragingly unconstitutional, delusional rants by presidents go, Donald Trump is once again the big winner because no other president has really had a public, ragingly unconstitutional, delusional comment about anything. Donald Trump said in writing that the people who conduct the Washington Post poll should be investigated for election fraud, should be investigated for a crime. That should be a criminal investigation. Okay, that means his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, should be in the middle of that investigation right now tonight. That also means someone's going to have to completely rewrite the law on election fraud to make accurate polling illegal, which, of course, a little thing that Donald Trump has never comprehended, the First Amendment, will not allow. There isn't another president in history who thought that anyone working at the Washington Post was a criminal. Richard Nixon knew that Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were on track in their investigative reporting in 1973 and 1974 to destroy the Nixon presidency and drive him out of office, which is exactly what they did. And Richard Nixon never called either one of them a criminal. Never. Richard Nixon never thought Woodward and Bernstein were criminals. Richard Nixon knew exactly who the criminals were. Richard Nixon knew the criminals were working for him. Richard Nixon knew he was a criminal. Richard Nixon knew the White House counsel was a criminal. Richard Nixon knew his Attorney General was a criminal. Richard Nixon knew his White House Chief of Staff was a criminal. And they were all found to be criminals in federal court except Richard Nixon, who received a presidential pardon a month after he resigned the presidency for all the crimes he committed during his presidency. Remember when the Trump team was promising 90 trade deals in 90 days, around the world in 90 days, solve the problem? Because the man who believes he runs the world was going to fix everything himself.
We're going to run 90 deals in 90 days is possible. The boss is going to be the chief negotiator. Nothing's done without him looking very carefully at it. He has such a fine attention to detail.
It's impossible to get more clownish than that man. That was 17 days ago. Do we have 17 trade deals? No. How many do we have? Zero. Exactly zero. 17 days and zero trade deals is what he meant to say. Donald Trump suggested that China would be begging for a trade deal. The president of China would immediately pick up the phone and call Donald Trump. The president of China hasn't done that. And Donald Trump is still trying to claim that negotiations on a trade deal with China, which would be the single most complex trade deal ever negotiated with a single country in the history of the world, is actually happening. A trade deal like that normally takes years. And China says nothing's happening. China says there are no negotiations. Now, imagine the president of China and everyone in the Chinese government watching Donald Trump publicly demonstrate just how weak he is compared to them by lying about them. Donald Trump is claiming that there are negotiations going on with China because Americans, as shown in those polls, hate his tariffs. The Chinese government has the luxury of not caring what anyone outside the government thinks of this trade war. The president of China doesn't run the world, but he sure does run China. So President Xi doesn't have to worry about public opinion the way Donald Trump does. That's why President Xi hasn't budged, and Donald Trump has. The Wall Street Journal editorial board says China called Mr. Trump's bluff and seems to have won this round. In a new article titled "Trump's Tariffs Have Done What No U.S. Adversary Could," Branko Marcelik writes, "The blanket, erratic, and often nonsensical nature of the tariffs has, far from showing signs of jump-starting the long process of reshoring manufacturing jobs, actually proven a major obstacle to that project while also leading manufacturers to shed jobs or scale back their plans and plunging the entire U.S. economy into uncertainty more broadly." This reached a crescendo with the mass sell-off of U.S. Treasury bonds earlier this month that briefly threatened to send the entire U.S. financial system buckling. Trump, in other words, has not just inadvertently demonstrated the extent of the United States' dependence on China, he has also wound up demonstrating other key nations' similar dependence while revealing stark limits to Washington's ability to make even its allies do what it wants. So much for the man who says, "I run the country and the world." The guy who claims he runs the world has not been able to negotiate a single trade deal with a single country in the world since promising 90 deals in 90 days. That makes Donald Trump, according to his own definition of success in this arena, the biggest loser in international trade in the history of the American presidency, and no amount of delusional screaming about Donald Trump's negative criminals can change what Donald Trump has done to make himself such a humiliated worldwide loser. Well, because Donald Trump is the most uncouth president in history, it is now disturbingly easy to be more publicly dignified than the president of the United States. Even I, someone lower born than Donald Trump, which is to say someone who has never inherited anything from anyone, can publicly, at least, conduct myself with more dignity than the president of the United States. And I will prove that tonight by, once again, not using a single word of profanity for the entire hour of this program, something Donald Trump was not able to do today during what was labeled a religious luncheon at the White House. Donald Trump couldn't keep it clean. In Donald Trump's personal life, he seems to believe strongly in the separation of church and Trump. But in the Trump White House, there is no separation of church and state. And so this year, Donald Trump created something he calls the White House Faith Office. The White House Faith Office is run by Pastor Paula White, who is now living on a government salary, and it employs someone called a faith director named Jenny Korn, who is also living on a government salary. And those, no doubt, devoutly religious people laughed it up today, laughed it up, when Donald Trump became the first president in history to use profanity at the first ever gathering of the first ever White House Faith Office. Faith in what? They specifically laughed at Donald Trump's jokes about divorce and women marrying men only for money because, you know, there's a religious event. That's the kind of joke that's supposed to work there. And when I say joke, it was a Trump nutty statement that wouldn't qualify for a joke in any real comedy venue. It's not clear that Donald Trump has the neurological capacity to actively decide whether or not to use profanity in public. In my own amateur clinical observation of patient Trump, it seems to me he does reach for profanity when he's feeling most under pressure. And Donald Trump has reason to feel that pressure now because of his publicly conducted friendship with a pedophile who killed himself in prison. Donald Trump is feeling intense pressure about the Epstein Files and who might be on the suspected client list in the Epstein Files, if there is one. And the only way Donald Trump actually feels pressure is when he loses support from his otherwise devoted followers. And the Trump presidency is hemorrhaging support tonight among devoted Trump supporters for two reasons. One, Donald Trump's illegal, unconstitutional, and economically disastrous tariffs, which a huge chunk of Trump supporters don't like and actively oppose. And two, because of Donald Trump's perceived betrayal by refusing to release the Epstein Files, something he promised to do as a candidate for president, and something his most fervent followers fully expected him to do. They believed him on that, and now they feel betrayed. Betrayed over Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump's old friend. And Donald Trump cannot afford to lose any support at this stage of his presidency. Donald Trump got 1.5% more votes than Kamala Harris. That is a very close presidential election. And Donald Trump now has 40% support for the way he's doing his job. Donald Trump couldn't afford to lose any support after that close election, but he's lost a lot of support. John Kennedy won the presidency in 1960 by less than 1% of the vote. President Kennedy won a smaller margin of victory than Donald Trump's 1.5%. But at this point in John F. Kennedy's presidency, 6 months in 1961, President Kennedy's approval rating was 73%. 73%. President Kennedy could have afforded to give up 10% support at the price of making some unpopular choice, but Donald Trump can't afford to do that. At this point in his presidency, George H.W. Bush had a 70% approval rating in 1989. And at this point in his presidency, Jimmy Carter had a 63% approval rating in 1977. Joe Biden had a 56% approval rating at this point in his presidency, and Donald Trump has 40%. The only president in the history of polling with a lower approval rating at this point in his presidency was Donald Trump, who in the summer of 2017 had a 38% approval rating. And we know what happened in the next congressional election. The Democrats won back the House of Representatives, and that is what we are on track for tonight, the Democrats winning back the House of Representatives. If the Democrats just win back the House districts where they lost by 1% in the last election, the Democrats will control the House of Representatives, and Donald Trump could face impeachment once again. Donald Trump could be impeached a third time with the Democrats in power in the House of Representatives, and that raises the question, is that why Donald Trump will not release the Epstein Files? Do Donald Trump and his attorney general know that the contents of the Epstein Files could get Donald Trump impeached by a Democratic House of Representatives? We know that Donald Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has an interest, at least, in the Epstein Files. Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist from the Miami Herald, Julie Brown, posted, quote, "It's interesting to note that Pam Bondi was Florida's Attorney General 2011 to 2019, a period of time when Jeffrey Epstein's plane records became public. Victims' lawsuits were filed, and a lot of new evidence against Epstein surfaced, so questions should be asked about why she didn't take up the case or launch a probe." when she was Attorney General in Florida. So is Pam Bondi in the Epstein files? Did Jeffrey Epstein have her phone number or any phone calls there about anything? Jeffrey Epstein knew a lot of people, knew a lot of powerful people in Florida. Did he know the Florida Attorney General at the time? We also know that Donald Trump was a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein's, according to Jeffrey Epstein himself, even though Donald Trump now tries to disown Jeffrey Epstein, and now Donald Trump appears, according to his son, to be trying to protect those pedophiles. Here is Donald Trump Jr. speaking on the campaign trail last year on behalf of his father, who is now, according to the logic of what you're about to hear from Donald Trump Jr., quote, trying to protect those pedophiles.
How is it that my father can be convicted of 34 crimes, but no one on Epstein's list has even been brought to light? I'm trying to figure out how that's possible, right, folks? It's almost like they're trying to protect those pedophiles for some reason. I can't imagine why.
You know, he was in the courtroom during his father's criminal trial in Manhattan. I saw him in the courtroom when he was there. He knows exactly why that jury found his father guilty on all 34 counts in that criminal case against Donald Trump for falsifying business records to cover up his payoffs for silence of a porn star, Stormy Daniels. Donald Trump Jr. was in that courtroom. He knows exactly how and why his father got convicted and why it wasn't difficult for that jury to do it. We all saw Donald Trump's exasperation last week when in the cabinet room, his attorney general was asked about her refusal, presumably on Donald Trump's orders, to release the Epstein files.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time?
Yeah, they're still talking about him. Donald Trump is now agonizing publicly in lengthy social media posts about the Epstein files. At first, he just tried to ignore it and dismiss it and hope his devoted followers would stop talking about it. But now he's calling his old friend, pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, the guy who never dies. Here is one example of Donald Trump's social media rantings about the Epstein files, which are much too long to read, these rantings of his in their entirety, and they're much too incoherent, but here is some. What's going on with my boys, and in some cases, gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job, exclamation point. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it all over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Donald Trump then said that the Epstein files were written by President Barack Obama. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on federal charges in the middle of the third year of the Trump presidency. That means the federal investigation of Jeffrey Epstein that led to federal charges occurred during the Trump presidency, supervised by the Trump Attorney General all the way, and the Trump-appointed FBI director at the time all the way. Further down in that same incoherent post, Donald Trump said, Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. So Donald Trump wants Kash Patel and the FBI focusing on, quote, arresting thugs and criminals instead of the Epstein files. The FBI is an active part of the Trump federal law enforcement team that actually includes the military, who are chasing down strawberry pickers in the strawberry fields of California. Kash Patel is part of the team that went chasing after kids on a baseball field in New York City earlier this month. That's what they're doing instead of releasing the Epstein files. That's what Donald Trump wants them to keep doing, chasing kids in middle school, in high school, on baseball fields. Donald Trump promised his voters to go after violent criminals who are in this country illegally, and he is chasing kids in middle school and high school playing baseball. That's what Donald Trump is really doing. And Donald Trump's voters do not approve, not all of them. And Donald Trump has lost some of his voters for exactly this crazy stuff of chasing hard workers in our agricultural fields, chasing kids on baseball fields, chasing people doing their jobs in factories, providing us with the things that we need. If Donald Trump leads Republicans to lose control of the House of Representatives, Donald Trump will have to worry about impeachment once again.
There are only two things that are possible here. Option one, Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, and the MAGA extremists intentionally lied to the American people for years about the Jeffrey Epstein situation. That's option one. Option two is that, in fact, there's reason for the American people to be concerned as it relates to what information has not been released that could be damaging to the Trump administration and the friends and family of the Trump administration and their billionaire corrupt supporters. And so they're actively engaging in a cover-up.
If Donald Trump leads the Republicans to a loss of the House of Representatives in the next election, Hakeem Jeffries, who you just saw, will be the Speaker of the House. It will be up to Hakeem Jeffries to make the big decision about whether to launch the third impeachment of Donald Trump. If information is revealed in the Epstein files or elsewhere that merits an impeachment, a third impeachment of Donald Trump. And here is Donald Trump today, feeling that possible pressure once again, the looming likelihood that the Democrats will take control of the House of Representatives and the power to impeach him in the next election.
I got indicted 5 times, impeached 2 times, all bullshit, right? All terrible stuff. And I got impeached for making a perfect phone call.
That was at the so-called Faith Office luncheon today. It's the only room where you can get a laugh about bombing a nursing home.
At the end of 50 days, if we don't have a deal, then we're going to have to do, we have no choice but to do secondary tariffs. You call it secondary tariffs, which are pretty tough, which we don't want to have to do. But let's see what happens. But we thought we had a deal. Numerous times I'd get home, I'd say, First Lady, I had the most wonderful talk with Vladimir. I think we're finished. And then I'll turn on the television, or she'll say to me one time, wow, that's strange because they just bombed a nursing home. I said, what?
What's wrong with those people? They just bombed a nursing home. Gets a laugh. The most perverse human being ever to speak into a microphone in the White House says they just bombed a nursing home. And the people who are gathered, presumably for some sort of religiously based luncheon, think that's funny. What is wrong with those people? The Wall Street Journal published an editorial yesterday titled, "Now Trump Says Forget Jeffrey Epstein." The Wall Street Journal editorial board, the conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board, says Donald Trump has traded in conspiracy stories for years. Barack Obama was born in Kenya. Ted Cruz's father had a link to JFK's killer. The 2020 election was stolen. Migrants are barbecuing people's pets. He seems to think this is good show business with appeal in certain niches of a fragmented culture. Yet now he's upset that the Jeffrey Epstein theories he fanned are proving hard to tamp down. Mr. Trump lamented online Saturday that his administration is taking heat over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. His advisors are suggesting this was a snipe hunt, but the MAGA base is in furious disbelief, since the same people pledged to catch some snipe. Maybe podcast provocateurs think it's fun to spin joking, not joking yarns about Taylor Swift rigging the Super Bowl to help President Biden. What about the truth? By the way, Mr. Trump now says the Epstein Fuhrer can't distract Ms. Bondi from the real conspiracy. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen, and they tried to do the same thing in 2024. That's what she is looking into as Attorney General, and much more. Then on Friday, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posted, quote, "Wow, who would have thought that electing a rapist would have complicated the release of the Epstein Files? A New York civil court found Donald Trump sexually abused E. Jean Carroll in a dressing room at a New York City department store in 1996. The jury awarded E. Jean Carroll $85 million in damages after the verdict was returned," the Washington Post reported in 2023. Quote, "A judge has now clarified that this is basically a legal distinction without a real-world difference. He says that what the jury found Trump did was in fact rape, as commonly understood." In July of 2020, while Donald Trump was running against Joe Biden, 11 months after Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, Donald Trump said, "I just wish her well," when he was talking about the woman who was Jeffrey Epstein's criminal co-defendant, who was later found guilty of procuring children for Jeffrey Epstein to repeatedly rape. That criminal co-defendant, Ghislaine Maxwell, is now serving 20 years in federal prison. This is what Donald Trump said about her when she was awaiting trial.
Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and a lot of people want to know if she's going to turn in powerful people. And I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well.
I just wish her well. Donald Trump admits, "I met her numerous times over the years." 2 weeks ago, after Donald Trump said that, Jonathan Swan conducted the only effective interview of Donald Trump during his first term as president. And Jonathan Swan zeroed in on Donald Trump's sympathy for a woman criminally accused of destroying the lives of children and leading them to their rapist.
A reporter asked you about Ghislaine Maxwell. You said, quote, "I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, but I wish her well, whatever it is." Mr. President, Ghislaine Maxwell has been arrested on allegations of child sex trafficking. Why would you wish such a person well?
First of all, I don't know that, but I do know that
She has. She's been arrested for that. You know
her
that.
friend or boyfriend,
Epstein,
was either killed or committed suicide in jail. She's now in jail. Yeah, I wish her well. I'd wish you well. I'd wish a lot of people well. Good luck. Let them prove somebody was guilty. I mean, do you know that?
Oh, so you're saying you hope she doesn't die in jail? Is that what you mean by wish her well?
Her boyfriend died in jail, and people are still trying to figure out, how did it happen? Was it suicide? Was he killed? And I do wish her well. I'm not looking for anything bad for her. I'm not looking bad for anybody. And they took that and
she's
made
a child alleged child sex trafficker.
Big deal. But all it is her boyfriend died. He died in jail. Was he killed? Was it suicide? I do. I wish her well.
I'm not looking bad for anybody. No, that's not English, but I wish her well is English. And Donald Trump tried to suggest there that if you're in prison, he wishes you well, no matter who you are. He would wish Jonathan Swan well. If he was in prison or just sitting there, he would presumably wish me well, which he's never done. Donald Trump hasn't said that about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who's in jail tonight. He doesn't say, I wish him well. Donald Trump doesn't say that about anyone who he has sent to prison in El Salvador on no criminal charges at all. Donald Trump hasn't said that about anyone who he hopes to send to his new version of Alcatraz in Florida, send more and more people there. He doesn't say, I wished them well or him well or anything positive about those people. Donald Trump is not in the business of wishing people well and never has been. Donald Trump has attacked more people publicly than anyone in the history of American politics without ever wishing them well. And the only criminal defendant and now convicted criminal who Donald Trump wishes well while serving a 20-year prison term for enabling child rape happens to be the only living person who has direct testimonial evidence about Donald Trump's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. I met her several times, says Donald Trump. Yes, he did. And Ghislaine Maxwell could testify about every one of those times if the Trump Justice Department was actually in the business of trying to find the truth instead of being on the team that wishes her well. Coming up, Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, who has called for the release of the Epstein Files, will join us next. Breaking news, the Republican-controlled House Rules Committee has just voted to block the release of the Epstein Files. Joining us now, the member of Congress who forced that vote, Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California. Congressman Khanna, give us the latest situation with the House Rules Committee.
Well, it's very disappointing. I had a very simple amendment that the full Epstein Files should be released. It went for a vote to the House Rules Committee. Jim McGovern, who is the ranking member for House Democrats, made sure that all 4 Democrats voted for the release. Ralph Norman, a Republican, actually joined with the Democrats, saying that there should be a vote on the full release. Chip Roy didn't show up for the vote, but 7 other Republicans blocked it. So as of now, there is going to be no vote tomorrow, up or down vote on whether the Epstein Files should be released.
And this was the first stage of your attempt to get a full vote by the House of Representatives, to see a full recorded vote. Everyone could see how their member of Congress voted on this issue. And that's what was blocked by the Rules Committee, not allowing you to get to that stage on the floor. Why would it be important to have that recorded vote on the floor?
Well, in a very simple way, we should see whose side are you on. That's really what this Epstein file issue has become. It's not just about knowing who's being protected, the rich and the powerful, in terms of who had interaction with Jeffrey Epstein. It's the sense that people have that the government is too beholden to certain interests who have their thumb on the scale, and that they're not working for ordinary people. And what the Democrats are saying is we want to make sure that we get full justice here, that we get full transparency. And this may have been the first attempt that was blocked, but I'll tell you it's not going to be the last attempt. We already have Representative Vesey, who has a resolution. Leader Jeffries is saying that we're going to push for transparency here. And we can keep introducing these kind of amendments every week, every month, to force the Republicans to demand the release. And this is something that many Republicans believe should happen, as was evidenced by Ralph Norman's vote.
The Elon Musk commentary on this situation continues. Elon Musk posted this after Donald Trump's long Jeffrey Epstein social media postings, Elon Musk said, seriously, he said Epstein half a dozen times while telling everyone to stop talking about Epstein. Just release the files as promised. Congressman, are you concerned about a possible precedent here that down the line, a few years from now, we could be talking about the release of some other federal criminal investigative file that you might think should not be released? Or is this a unique case? This is, after all, in the entire history of this country, we have exactly one president who had a convicted pedophile as a best friend.
Lawrence, look, I think you raise a very thoughtful point, which doesn't surprise me. I mean, there's a reason you have DOJ policy saying you can't leak things about people before you charge them. You would not want a Justice Department that just arbitrarily started leaking things about people caught up in an investigation. But here you have a very unique situation. You have a president of the United States who promised the American people the release of these files. You have an attorney general who went on television and said that on her desk is a Epstein client list and that she's going to promise to release that to the American public. So now you have a question of trust. And I think what the president should do is say this is a unique circumstance that potentially involves governments of other countries, that involves potentially national security. And for a one-time issue, we're going to release it to have total transparency. We're going to protect the victims, but we're going to release it. And this is not precedent setting. It's simply doing what I and the Attorney General promised the American people. And if they don't do that, they have a huge issue.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much for joining us with your own breaking news report of what was happening in the House tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And coming up, Donald Trump's tariffs are terrible for the economy. That's obvious. But they are hurting Donald Trump's support with his own voters who have turned against the Donald Trump tariffs in very significant numbers. Congressman Mark Pocan joins us next. Politico has a new poll showing Donald Trump losing the support of his own voters for his illegal, unconstitutional, and economically disastrous tariffs. Politico reports 46% of Trump voters say that they support tariffs on China, even if it increases prices at home. Only 46%. 9% of Trump voters oppose any tariffs on China. And Donald Trump cannot afford to lose even those 9% of his supporters. Only 32% of Trump voters live in the dream world where they support the tariffs only if the tariffs don't increase prices. The Politico poll shows that only 45% of Trump voters think Donald Trump should be able to impose tariffs by himself. 44% of Trump voters believes tariffs should only be imposed by Congress as the Constitution requires. Donald Trump has set August 1st as a new Trump deadline, which is to say a very movable deadline, for some dramatic new tariffs he's been announcing over the weekend and before, including 35% tariffs on Canada, 30% tariffs on the European Union, and 30% tariffs on Mexico. So far, the stock market seems to be operating on their new taco rule about the recent Trump tariff announcements, with the Wall Street coinage meaning Trump always chickens out. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin. Thank you very much for joining us. You appeared with us once before on this subject as an experienced small business owner, operator yourself. What is happening out there in the world of smaller businesses, the kind of businesses that you've operated because of these tariffs?
Well, it's a mess. Thanks for having me, Lawrence. The problem is, Donald Trump doesn't really have a tariff policy or an industrial policy. He has edicts like he's the king of Trump-istan, but he doesn't do what a president should do, work with Congress, and you can have tariffs. And you could use them wisely, but Donald Trump doesn't do that. He just throws them out indiscriminately. There's no rhyme or reason to the numbers, who gets them. And at the end of the day, a small business, like I recently was in Evansville, Placerville, Wisconsin, in my district, talking to small business people who were affected. You know, they're getting invoices and it has a tariff fee added of 15% or whatever it is from whatever country. People with a bike store are having a hard time getting kids bikes that aren't going to have tariffs in time for the holidays. It's got a real impact on those local mom and pop businesses in remote places of Wisconsin, and Donald Trump doesn't care because Donald Trump, you know, he's just creating edicts like he's some kind of king.
Are you encountering basically what the Politico poll is finding is very large hunks of Trump voters opposing the tariffs, realizing that they will increase prices, and also objecting to their complete unpredictability being imposed by one person? Are there Trump voting business operators out there who you've been encountering in Wisconsin who now are experiencing exactly what the Politico report, poll is showing?
I have to admit, I had a meeting in my office I enjoyed too much, Lawrence, where a bunch of Republican Trump voting business people were in complaining about the tariffs. And I said, yeah, elections have consequences, don't they? And, you know, they didn't really say much, but they're they're definitely impacted. And those costs get passed on to consumers. So this is just another tax from Donald Trump. So he didn't address the cost of living like he promised when he got elected. And now he's taking us the complete wrong direction by now giving us new taxes through these tariffs. And the problem is, because they're so indiscriminate and there's not really a policy to them, you never know when you're going to pay more for things. I think right now I saw tomatoes are about to take an increase with the tariffs coming from Mexico. And I saw a restaurant owner saying they may not be in business in 45 days if they're still existing. So this chaotic policy is not about industrial policy. It's not about making things in America, which we all would love to do. This is just about edicts by a guy who thinks he's a king. And at the end of the day, all of us as the subjects are going to pay the price.
Congressman Pocan, could you just please stay with us? We have to squeeze in a commercial break here. We're going to be right back.
Sure.
Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin back with us. I made the point earlier in the hour that if the Democrats just win the House seats, that they lost by 1% in the last election, that will be enough to flip the House to Democratic control. Donald Trump seems to be doing so far everything he can, as he did in his first term as president, to help you Democrats win back the House of Representatives.
Yeah, I feel like I owe him a thank you. I'll give him a public one now. The problem is, you know, what he's doing in order to help us get the majority is going to cost a lot of people, whether it be the fact that he's not addressing the cost of living, whether he's adding these tariffs as taxes on us, the fact that 17 million people will lose health care, millions of people will lose food assistance, millions of people will lose education funding, and then the ripple effects of adding, you know, trillions of dollars to the debt while he gets a tax cut and Elon Musk gets a tax cut, and the lower 30% of people actually pay more for the big ugly bill they passed. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that are happening that will help us next November, but unfortunately, they're really going to hurt the American people along the way.
Yeah, we've never seen this kind of direct pain inflicted on voters willfully by an administration like this with a midterm election approaching.
Yeah, well, you know, Donald Trump cares about one thing, Donald Trump. And as long as he's getting a tax cut, as long as he's getting something out of this, some connection with a ruler of another country and he can put a hotel up or something, that's what he cares about. The problem is, you know, for all the people in my district that have been calling our office at record numbers this year, you know, health insurance matters. And, you know, for people on the Affordable Care Act losing the subsidy, I was told a couple making who are 60 years old, making $85,000 a year, could see their premiums go up as much as $16,000 next year. You may not be able to afford health insurance anymore. And then there's the ripple effects. Those rural hospitals and nursing homes are going to be affected. There's just so much that's going to happen. And they even made sure that some of them didn't take place till after the next election. But the ACA cuts, people are going to feel right away.
Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Sure. Thank you.
That is tonight's last word.
Now it's time for The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen, that is exactly why I watch your show, is because I'm going to learn things from you about things I already knew. I already knew about those colors at the White House, but I didn't know that story. I didn't know the backstory, and now we do. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, I listened to your monologue on the way home because I always learn things from you. And now all you need to do for me is write a new season of The West Wing, and I'll tell you more stories, if we can agree to that.
All right. We'll get right to that. Thanks, Jen.
Sounds good. Have a great night, Lawrence.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, Pete Hegseth was reported to have had such a severe drinking problem while working as a weekend morning host at Fox that he promised Republican senators that he would not drink if they voted to confirm him as Secretary of Defense. And so we're just going to have to assume that Pete Hegseth was stone cold sober today when he said something that sounds like it belongs in the great Comedy Central TV series Drunk History.
President Trump directed the most complex and secretive military operation in history.
It's the kind of thing that wouldn't be surprising for him to say if he still had his job at Fox and was drunk at a hotel bar. In 2017, a police report about Pete Hegseth being drunk in a hotel bar said that Pete Hegseth told the police, quote, that he was buzzed but not intoxicated during an encounter with a Republican woman who, after spending time in Pete Hegseth's hotel room, filed a complaint with Monterey police claiming that she was raped. No criminal charges were filed after the police investigation. And none of that information bothered Republicans in the Senate in any way when it came time to vote for Donald Trump's selection of Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense. But all of those senators, all those Republican senators knew that as Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth was going to sound like a character in Drunk History. Let's listen again to the stupidest public lie ever told by a Secretary of Defense.
President Trump directed the most complex and secretive military operation in history.
Now, some secretaries of defense, particularly during the Vietnam War, found themselves telling worse lies, more important lies, about their plans to win the war that we lost decisively. But those secretaries weren't telling lies that were provably false in the moment that they said them. A presumably sober Pete Hegseth actually said Donald Trump directed the most complex and secretive military operation in history. Donald Trump directed nothing. Donald Trump said go to a plan that has been in place for many, many years. The Defense Department is filled with attack plans and war plans that it usually never uses, but always knows how to execute. Bombing Iran's nuclear facilities is something the Defense Department has known how to do for as long as Iran was suspected of possibly developing nuclear weapons. President Obama could have done it simply by saying go. President Obama authorized the mission that took out Osama bin Laden, but that mission was designed by military professionals and was directed by military professionals after President Obama listened to the plan and simply said, go. That's the way it works. And that was a much more complex and secretive military operation than the bombing run Donald Trump publicly talked about before he authorized it. There was nothing secretive about the possibility that Donald Trump might approve the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities. Donald Trump publicly said that he might do that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt did not publicly say that he might approve an invasion of Normandy on D-Day in World War II sometime in the next 2 weeks. There's nothing secretive about a president saying, I might order the bombing sometime in the next 2 weeks. And there is nothing complex about a single bombing run over a country that has no air defenses left because Israel took them out already. The only thing the President of the United States said before the first atomic bomb was dropped at the end of World War II was, go. President Harry Truman had nothing to do with the development of the atomic bomb. That was all done under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. President Harry Truman knew next to nothing about the secretive process of developing that bomb. He just knew that shortly after President Roosevelt died in office, Vice President Truman ascended to the presidency, and that the bomb he found out about when he became president was ready to go. And it was Harry Truman's decision to make. He didn't direct anything about the mission. He didn't figure out what altitude the plane had to fly at so that it wouldn't be destroyed by the effects of the bomb that it dropped. Harry Truman didn't figure out what the weather had to be over Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. Harry Truman didn't figure out how much fuel it would take to get the aircraft back to safety. But each of those bombing missions were the most complex and secretive bombing missions in military history, and they remain that. The only two bombing missions in which any country in the world has ever dropped an atomic bomb. The bombing runs over North Vietnam were more complex, more secretive, and much more dangerous because those bombers could be and were shot down. Pete Hegseth promised Republican senators that he would not drink if he became Secretary of Defense, but he did not promise that he wouldn't sound drunk. The single most complex and secretive military operation in history was, in fact, the D-Day invasion that has been the subject of hundreds of books, dozens and dozens of movies, none of which can capture the full complexity of the years of preparation and planning and the secretive, intense discipline that made D-Day the successful turning point in World War II that it was. Pete Hegseth tried to steal all of that and hand it to Donald Trump. Pete Hegseth tried to defend Donald Trump's claim that Iran's nuclear facilities were obliterated by the bombing. No one in the American military has made that claim. And today, Pete Hegseth, in effect, seized the microphone when the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, was asked about the bombing damage.
General, on Sunday, you said final battle damage will take some time. And you also said, I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there at the nuclear facility. So that was just over 3 days ago. So what has changed? Would you use the term obliterated as well?
Sure, like I said, we don't do BDA. I'll refer that to the intelligence community. And
you're talking with them. I mean, what changed in the past 3 days that make you so, you know?
Sir, I think I
think I explained what changed. There was a great deal of irresponsible reporting based on leaks, preliminary information in low confidence. Again, when someone leaks something, they do it with an agenda. And when you leak a portion of an intelligence assessment, but just a little portion that makes it seem like maybe the strike wasn't effective, then you start a news cycle, whether it's the Washington Post or Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, you start a news cycle that starts to call into question the efficacy. No, that's why. So you bring the chairman here, who's not involved in politics. He doesn't do politics. That's my lane to understand and translate and talk about those types of things. So I can use the word obliterated.
Well, he was a paid liar for Fox, so of course he can use any word he wants now that he's Donald Trump's appointed liar at the Defense Department. Pete Hegseth had a run-in with the best reporter who has ever been employed by Fox today, Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin. Jennifer Griffin, in her 18 years of experience covering the Pentagon, knows more about the Defense Department and its operations than Pete Hegseth might ever know.
Do you have certainty that all the highly enriched uranium was inside the Fordo Mountain, or some of it, because there were satellite photos that showed more than a dozen trucks there 2 days in advance? Are you certain none of that highly enriched uranium was moved?
Of course, we're watching every single aspect, but Jennifer, you've been about the worst the one who misrepresents the most intentionally what the president says. I'm familiar.
About the ventilation shafts on Saturday night. And in fact, I was the first to describe the B-2 bombers, the refueling, the entire mission with great accuracy. So I take issue with that.
I appreciate you acknowledging that this was the
issues.
first the most successful mission based on operational security that this department has done since you've been here, and I appreciate that. So
Absolutely.
we're looking at all aspects of intelligence and making sure we have a sense of what was where.
Pete Hegseth, along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, participated in a closed-door briefing to all members of the Senate today. After that briefing, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut said this.
Listen, to me, it still appears that we have only set back the Iranian nuclear program by a handful of months. I walk away from that briefing still under the belief that we have not obliterated the program. The president was deliberately misleading the public when he said the program was obliterated. It is certain that there is still significant capability and significant equipment that remain.
Before he became Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth said that he opposed women serving in the military. In his book, Pete Hegseth wrote, "We need moms, but not in the military, especially not in combat units." And in November, Pete Hegseth said this.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated.
And once again today, Pete Hegseth demonstrated just how obsessed he is with trying to keep women out of combat roles by refusing to acknowledge the women who actually participated in the bombing mission in Iran.
Why not acknowledge the female pilots that also participated in this mission? The early messages that you sent out only congratulated the boys.
So when I say something like our boys and bombers, see, this is the kind of thing the press does, right? Of course, the chairman mentioned a female bomber pilot. That's fantastic. She's fantastic. She's a hero. I want more female bomber pilots. I hope the men and women of our country sign up to do such brave and audacious things. But when you spin it as, because I say our boys and bombers as a common phrase, I'll keep saying things like that, whether they're men or women. I'm very proud of that female pilot, just like I'm very proud of those male pilots. And I don't care if it's a male or a female in that cockpit, and the American people don't care. But it's the obsession with race and gender in this department that's changed priorities. We don't do that anymore. We don't play your little games.
Boys and bombers. Boys and bombers was a common phrase. Yeah, maybe during World War II when we only had men in combat roles. But we've had women in bombers for a long time now. And Pete Hegseth can't quite fit that into his language. He said, I don't care if it's a male or female in that cockpit. Okay, then let's just call them girls instead of boys. Or even better, let's call them what they really are, men and women. America was offered an opportunity today for all of us to do an intelligence assessment of Pete Hegseth. And for most observers, once again, Pete Hegseth failed that intelligence assessment. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington. He is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. From your position on the committee, what do you make of the damage assessment of the bombing as of now?
Well, several things. First of all, we don't really know because we have other ways of getting intel. We're gathering it, trying to figure out what might the Iranians be saying about it. We really don't know. We don't have eyes on the ground, and we can't be 100% sure. That's number one. Number two, I am quite confident that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth would lie about it. All right. So we can't trust the thing they say. We had the instance where they did the intel assessment of whether or not Venezuela was launching an invasion against us with gang members. And the intel assessment came back that no, they weren't. So Trump fired the intel assessment people because they hadn't given him the answer he wanted. So we know that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump will claim for as long as is humanly possible that they destroyed this, whether or not they did. And the third thing I think we know is that Iran still has a nuclear program. Was it set back months? Was it set back 8 months or a year? I mean, that's going to depend on how many centrifuges they have left and how much highly enriched uranium they have left. But they absolutely still have some centrifuges. They still have some highly enriched uranium, and they certainly still have the capability, which means they still have a nuclear program, and we still have a problem. We still need to negotiate with Iran to get them to stop that nuclear program. And we only have to do that, of course, because Donald Trump tore up the agreement that we had that had stopped Iran from developing a nuclear program. But that press conference today, and you did a great job of explaining it, but it was an embarrassment on so many levels to have a Secretary of Defense be that partisan, that political over an important military mission. It was an embarrassment to watch.
So you had a president of the United States publicly entertaining the possibility that he would order a bombing run on Iran's nuclear facilities, publicly entertaining that for days, and then at a certain point saying he might do it sometime in the next 2 weeks or after the next 2 weeks. But in any event, repeatedly saying publicly, loud enough for Iran and the rest of the world to hear that he was thinking about doing that. Then we get reports of trucks at the facility, trucks capable of removing some of the valuable material they would need to preserve their program. What are the chances that the Iranians would have done absolutely nothing in preparation for the possibility of Donald Trump sending a bombing run?
Pretty close to zero. I was going to say something like the Iranians aren't stupid, but they don't have to be that smart to have figured out to try and do something. And look, there's an overarching problem here. I mean, the way Hegseth approached this press conference with, the most secretive, complex military operation in history, which you did a good job of pointing out the absurdity of, but the whole authoritarian tone, the whole it's true because the king said it was true approach. It goes to the broader problem of Donald Trump acting more like a dictator and less like a democratically elected president of a constitutional republic. And it leads to blind spots and ignorance. I mean, if you assume you're right, if you assume the world is going to bow before you, then why would you think about something like you just said? Like, hey, maybe if you give the Iranians a heads up, they'll have time to try to figure out how to avoid it. It's the entire approach of the Trump administration, and Pete Hegseth fills his role incredibly well in that, certainly for Donald Trump's purposes, but not for the purposes of the American people and our national security needs.
So Pete Hegseth tried to suggest that generals are not allowed to use absolutist language even when the evidence shows that an absolute, a total success occurred, that they're simply not allowed to say that that's somehow political language. And the general was very careful not to say anything about the idea that everything had been wiped out in the Iranian nuclear program. Is the general in any way prevented from using a word like obliterated if something actually was obliterated?
No, I mean, he's only prevented in the sense that what he has to say has to be accurate. I mean, obviously, with bin Laden, dude was dead. He was on a ship. We dumped him in the ocean. We knew he was dead. We knew that with 100% certainty because we saw the body. We had pictures of the body. So the generals could come out and say, mission accomplished. Bin Laden is dead. And if we knew for an absolute fact that all 19,000 centrifuges that Iran had before Israel attacked them and before our bombing run were gone and destroyed, if he knew for an absolute fact that all 60% plus enriched uranium that the Iranians had was destroyed, he could have said that. He doesn't know. And Pete Hegseth doesn't know, and Donald Trump doesn't know. But we can certainly look at the evidence of what Iran has done, of what the bombing campaigns could and could not accomplish, and conclude that it's highly unlikely that it was all destroyed. But certainly the president, Pete Hegseth, don't know that it was. If the general did know that it was, yeah, he can go ahead and speak the truth. Well, sorry. In normal circumstances, he can go ahead and speak the truth. Working for Donald Trump, you have to be careful about that. You have to make sure that whatever your truth is aligns with Donald Trump's factual views of the world. But in normal circumstances, no, there's nothing prohibiting a general from saying what he knows.
The larger and totally unhinged point that Donald Trump made yesterday was that he believes that he has ended all hostilities between Iran and Israel, has permanently ended them. And as he put it, the war is over. He's pretending, you know, this is VE Day or VJ Day in World War II, and it is completely over.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is Iran and Israel exchanged missile fire twice last year, in April and in October. Both times, the Biden administration helped Israel defend itself, brought together a coalition of folks, and then worked with others to end the hostilities after that. So Donald Trump has basically done once what Joe Biden did twice last year. And that's fine. That's good. It's better that Israel and Iran aren't continuing to shoot missiles at each other right now. But the hostilities are not over because Iran, again, still has a nuclear weapons program. They still have missiles. They are still a threat to Israel. They still support proxies in the region. And that's going to be the really interesting part. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has reason to claim that, you know, the Iranian nuclear program was more degraded than perhaps it was as an initial matter. But this is real life for Israel. They face that threat. And sometime very soon, Israel is going to realistically assess that threat and try to figure out what to do about it. And they're not going to be content to just sit back. So there still has to be an agreement here. There still has to be an agreement. The war isn't over. I've been joking with everyone today. You know, people ask me how I'm doing. I say, it's great. The war in the Middle East is over. Donald Trump said it. It's done. By the way, let's remember that the war in Gaza is still going. Israel is still bombing in Syria. They are still occasionally bombing in Lebanon. The Houthis are still occasionally shooting missiles at Israel. And by the way, I'm not blaming that on Donald Trump. But let's remember, Donald Trump is the one who ran for office saying he was the magic man. He was going to come in and he was going to make peace happen. You know, the Ukraine war, over in a day. It's going to be easy. By the way, did you see the clip the other day when Trump was trying to explain why the Ukraine war wasn't over? He said, well, you know, it turned out that it was more difficult. And what a normal person would have said was, than I thought. Nah, he can't say that. It was more difficult than some people thought. Not him. Not the guy who said he could end it in a day. So I'm not blaming him for that. But the lies and the dishonesty, it's time for the American people to realize that Trump talks a big game, he delivers very little, and we need to hold him accountable for it.
Congressman Adam Smith, thank you very much for starting off our discussions tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence. Appreciate the chance.
Thank you. And coming up today, Donald Trump lied about his budget bill, which he believes is the only way he can get it passed. And while he was at it, he told the stupidest story ever told by a president about his own tax policy. That's next. The breaking news of this hour is that NBC News is reporting that at a meeting at the White House today, Donald Trump told the Senate Majority Leader to just get the Republican budget bill passed next week. NBC News reports during the meeting, which came as Republicans are trying to coalesce around which provisions to include in the bill, Trump stressed to Thune that he just wants Republicans to get a bill on his desk for him to sign before the 4th of July. That will be interpreted by Republican senators as Donald Trump being willing to accept anything being included or not included in that bill, just to get it passed. Here's Donald Trump today lying about his budget bill.
They have things, whether it's border or economic development or no tax on tips and Social Security and no tax on overtime and all these different things. There are hundreds of things here. It's so good. And we're going to also cut costs. We're cutting $1.7 trillion in this bill, and you're not going to feel any of it. And your Medicaid is left alone. It's left the same.
In fact, the version of the bill passed by the House of Representatives includes the largest Medicaid cut in history that will take health care away from 16 million people. And those same Medicaid provisions that passed the House are now in trouble in the Senate because the Senate parliamentarian has ruled that the Medicaid provisions cannot be included in a Senate budget bill that qualifies for fast-track procedures in the Senate that allow a bill to be passed with 51 votes instead of first clearing a 60-vote threshold. NBC News is reporting that the Senate Majority Leader John Thune is now falling behind his own schedule and will not be able to bring the bill to the Senate floor tomorrow as planned, which makes it increasingly doubtful that it can be passed before the 4th of July. Donald Trump told a story today about how he came up with the idea that he's very proud of no tax on tips. And remember, most American workers do not receive tips. So this is not a tax break for them. It is a tax break for people who Donald Trump likes better than the people who don't receive tips. Donald Trump said it happened in Las Vegas when someone he called a, quote, young, beautiful waitress told him that she didn't want to pay taxes on her tips.
She looked at me, she said, "Sir, there should be no tax on tips." I said, "Say it again." "There should be no tax on tips." I said, "That's the coolest thing I've ever heard." I walked outside, the press was there, as always, waiting for something bad to happen, hundreds of them. I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please announce tonight there will be no tax on tips."
There are many reasons why no Secretary of the Treasury has ever advised a president to have no tax on tips. You just heard the stupidest story ever told by a president about tax policy. So Donald Trump thinks some income should be protected from taxation and some shouldn't. So a Las Vegas lap dancer's income should be tax-free, but a Las Vegas public school teacher must pay full taxes on all income. Same with Donald Trump's idea of no tax on overtime. Public school teachers don't get overtime, so public school teachers must pay full income taxes on all of their income. But if you're in a job that gets overtime, that's free income to you in Donald Trump's tax policy. There is no rationale for that tax policy. If you're self-employed and you work 60 or 70 hours a week or more, you pay full taxes on that income. So no tax on overtime is not rewarding people who work hard. It is rewarding only some people who work hard, depending on who their employer is. And it is making the other people who work hard pay for the tax break that the people who work overtime will be enjoying, and the people who don't make tips or overtime will be paying for the tax breaks for people who do get tips or overtime, many of whom make more than public school teachers who make nothing from tips or overtime. This is terrible and unfair tax policy at the lower end of our income scales, which balances the grotesquely unfair tax policy at the top end of our income scales that the Trump budget bill includes, with the biggest tax breaks in the bill going, of course, to the richest people in the world. Joining us now is Brendan Duke, Senior Director of the Federal Fiscal Policy at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. He was an advisor to the Biden-Harris National Economic Council. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. The bill seems to be in real trouble tonight, both from the Senate parliamentarian and from John Thune having an emergency meeting with the president, and then John Thune delaying what was supposed to be the beginning of Senate action on the bill tomorrow.
Yeah, this bill is not popular, and I think we're seeing that. It's fundamentally broken. They're going to try to fix some things to deal with, the Senate parliamentarian. But the thing is, they were sloppy with complying with Senate rules. But that sloppiness also applies to the entire construction of this bill, where millions of people lose health insurance, lose, assistance buying groceries, to pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest people in America. It's totally flawed.
The tax policy, if we can call it that, which is literally Donald Trump encountering a Las Vegas waitress and deciding that for some reason tips should not be taxed, that there's a form of income that we shouldn't tax at all. This is about as stupid a tax policy as you could come up with, and he describes it as having been conceived in the stupidest possible way.
Yes, this is the dine and dash approach when it comes to helping working class Americans. So less than 5% of workers receive any tips at all, and only a fraction of them actually pay federal income taxes, so would get $1 of tax cut here, right? So we're talking very meager tax cuts for working class Americans. But this is not just a tax bill, it is a health bill, it is a nutrition assistance bill. The key thing is, 2 in 5 tipped workers receive their health care from Medicaid and Affordable Care Act exchanges, right? So these guys are going to face losing health insurance in a bill that just gives them meager tax cuts, right? SNAP, do you know what the #1 industry is for employing workers who receive SNAP, which is assistance buying food? It's the restaurant industry. So I think it's just a total distraction and bad tax policy, and just that we should not be drawing these lines. There's no reason why a security guard or janitor should be paying a higher tax rate than a waiter. We have great tools to lift up all waiters, all security guards, all janitors through things like the Earned Income Tax Credit. Donald Trump is ignoring those tools, though.
Not to mention raising minimum wages and other policies. The way Donald Trump arrives at tax policy here is clearly just the way it's going to sound when he says it out loud. He has no idea that he is prejudicially treating some forms of income over others. There are people who have employers who have overtime, but only for some workers, and who can decide which workers are going to get the overtime, which workers won't. It won't be fairly distributed free income with no income taxes on it.
Yeah, the employer has the ultimate say over which of their workers get overtime and when. And, you know, I think it's just kind of dividing working class Americans where, you know, something like less than 10% of workers receive, you know, classic overtime pay, you know, only a fraction receive tips. It's dividing these lines. Well, the average tax cut for millionaires is $90,000 a year. And on top of that, this is undermining the 40-hour work week, this no tax on overtime idea. Overtime pay is the linchpin of the 40-hour work week because it disincentivizes employers from having their workers work all that time and kind of understaffing the work site, right? And so basically this turns it into a tax incentive for overworking workers. So again, you know, and this is all about, you know, saying I'm, you know, this working class champion, but at the end of the day, the tax cuts for millionaires are $800 billion. The no tax on stuff is like $150 billion. So the tax cuts for millionaires are 5 times larger than all these, you know, populist sounding tax breaks.
Brendan Duke, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And coming up, in 5 days, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, will be officially dismantled by the Trump administration. Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Nicholas Kristof, who has been following the devastating worldwide impacts of all of this, will join us next. In 5 days, on July 1st, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, will be officially dismantled by the Trump administration. Its remaining functions will be absorbed by the State Department. Bloomberg News reports, according to a State Department draft assessment, that process of shutting down, just shutting down USAID, will cost more than $6 billion, including hundreds of millions needed to fight legal challenges over the shutdown and dismissal of thousands of its workers. Yesterday, Donald Trump's budget director, Russell Vaught, who enthusiastically helped lead the charge to close USAID, was a witness at a Senate Appropriations Committee hearing.
Boston University has put together a tracker of the impact of this sudden shutdown of these programs around the world. Let's review the child death count from the Boston University School of Public Health tracking of the impact of your shutdowns. 77,000 children have died up to today. their estimate, from pneumonia as a result of the shutdowns. 70,000 children have died from malnutrition. 59,000 have died from diarrhea. 33,000 have died from malaria. 7,000 infants have died from HIV, plus 118,000 adults. We are talking 250,000 children because of your irresponsible shutdown of programs that Congress had fully authorized and you unconstitutionally shut down in partnership with Elon Musk and the Secretary of State. How do you feel about being responsible for hundreds of thousands of children dying because of your sudden interruption in these key programs?
I reject the assertion.
You chose to shut down programs in the middle that have resulted in hundreds of thousands of children dying in the last few months. I find that abhorrent, and few Americans have ever had such a devastating and disasterly impact.
New York Times columnist Nick Kristof writes, a child dies of malnutrition-related causes every 15 seconds or so, even as 185,535 boxes of Plumpy Nut are stacked in a warehouse in Rhode Island, already paid for by American taxpayers. Navin Salem, chief executive of Adizia Nutrition, which makes the peanut paste and owns the warehouse, says the United States government owns the boxes, but now doesn't seem to know how to move them to where they're needed. So the government accumulates storage costs for Plumpy Nut as children die for want of it. Is there any kind of dysfunction more callous and capricious? Joining us now is Nicholas Kristof, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and New York Times columnist. Nick, thank you very much for joining us tonight. What was your reaction to the budget director's testimony simply rejecting this description of what he's done?
You know, I just wanted to drag him on a trip with me and take him with me so you can see the results of it. And I think that, you know, his eyes and generally eyes glaze over at 350,000 people total, which is the latest figure for that Boston University tracker for adults and children alike who've died because of the USAID dismantling. But when you come across one child in front of you who is dying because they're not getting that Plumpy Nut, or, you know, there was one village I visited in Liberia. I visited the family of a woman named Yama Freeman, and I would have really liked to take him to see that family because she was pregnant. She's a mother of two. There's Yama, and she then hemorrhaged, and the U.S. had provided an ambulance for that county, so it should have been able to rescue her, but instead the U.S. had cut off fuel supplies for that ambulance, so it couldn't move. And so when her family called the ambulance, they said, well, provide some fuel and we can rescue her. And so a bunch of the young men in the village put her in a hammock and put her on their shoulders, and they raced down the path toward the hospital, and she bled to death on the way. And, you know, you multiply that by thousands and thousands, and that's what happens when you have this rushed, capricious, unthought out collapse of USAID. You get women in villages like that, Kayata in Liberia, bleeding to death unnecessarily, leaving two children behind.
You know, Senator Merkley did ask the question that I have been wondering about, and I'm still wondering about it because there was no answer. And it's, how do you feel? That's the question for Elon Musk. How do you feel about, as Bill Gates put it, being the richest man in the world, killing the poorest people in the world? How do you feel? And it is just inconceivable that these people can be doing this. But we still don't have an answer on that how do you feel question from any one of them.
I mean, there's sort of a competition of cold-heartedness around the administration, whether it's taking away Medicaid money or you know, there's certainly domestically and abroad, there is a competition to see who can be most cold-hearted. But I think it would be hard to beat the way we so abruptly destroyed an agency, U.S. Agency for International Development, that not only projected American soft power, that not only protected us from diseases around the world like Ebola and tuberculosis, but was also saving the lives of 6 people every minute. And then we just blew it up.
Nick Kristof, please stay with us. We're going to fit in a quick commercial break here, and we'll be right back with Nick Kristof. In Nicholas Kristof's latest New York Times column, he writes, "Don't guilt trip me" is a refrain I heard from many readers of my recent columns from West Africa and South Sudan about children dying because of cuts in American humanitarian aid. We cannot save every dying child or every mom hemorrhaging in childbirth, but our inability to save all lives does not imply that we should save none. A starving child on the brink of death can be brought back with a specialty peanut paste, Plumpy Nut, costing just $1 a day. And the anemia that often causes women to hemorrhage and die in childbirth can be prevented with prenatal minerals and vitamins costing $2.13 for an entire pregnancy. Nick Kristof is back with us. And Nick, I find in those comments you've been getting from readers a hint of what Elon Musk and people who are doing this might be thinking, although we haven't heard from them, that it simply isn't our job to have to do this, even though it's incredibly easy and cheap for us to do it.
Yeah, do you remember when Musk said that empathy was the greatest weakness of Western civilization? You know, that's kind of what a lot of those views suggest, that we don't need to worry about people of a different skin color or passport color, that we, you know, not only should we not go to heroic lengths to help them, but we shouldn't provide $2.13 to help somebody. And, you know, I hope we're better than that. I hope we manage to claw back some of this funding, and we're not going to save every person, but boy, we can, you know, when we do things right, the way we turned the tide on AIDS, as you know, with PEPFAR, I mean, we've done some heroic things. We celebrate a fireman who saved one life. I mean, American citizens, through their tax dollars, have been saving vast millions of lives with USAID until now.
And the president's fund combating AIDS in Africa was a George W. Bush creation. That was, to my mind, the single best thing he did as president.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I think, Lawrence, what offends me is that it's not just the, you know, the cruelty. It's not just economizing, but it's just utter incompetence. I mean, you know, Doge talked about efficiency. In a warehouse in Sierra Leone, I came across 7 million doses of medicine for river blindness that had been donated by Merck. They were, you know, they were free. They'd been transported by Merck. They're in this locked warehouse, and along with millions of doses of other medicines. And now they can't be distributed because USAID has been shut down. And the distribution has been canceled. And, you know, this is a free program, and we let it slip through our fingers.
Nick Kristof, thank you very much for your invaluable reporting on this, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
We'll be right back. Nicholas Kristof gets tonight's last word.
The last word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen, you were a former communications professional in the political world. What do you call it when a politician who's trying to get away from a scandal keeps talking about the scandal?
Evasion, self-implosion. I mean, it is a 101 what not to do. I know. Chris and I were talking about this, Lawrence. We might still be talking about it because the right wing and the manosphere is running away from Trump. But he keeps talking about it.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep talking about it because it is news. And there's more things that keep coming out about it. So here we are.
And we know that he doesn't want us to talk about it, which is always a good guideline for what we should be talking about. But for me, what's so fascinating about it is we've been kind of staring at this Trump political phenomenon, wondering what could break it apart. Could anything break it apart? And in politics, you break it apart if you just reduce it by 5%. That's all it takes. That's the same thing as zero, because if it drops 5% support, it can't possibly win anything. And he is right now in a real separation anxiety situation with some of his most fervent previous supporters. We've always seen them come back in the fold, but some of these people, who knows? Who knows? I was going to say, might not come back. All I can say is they're not there tonight, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
That's all we can say. They're personally offended. I'll just end with saying, Lawrence, the best way to end up on my show or your show is for Trump to say, don't talk about it. That's makes it to the top of the list.
It absolutely
there
works.
You go. So thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Tonight on this program, for the first time, you are going to hear the words Trump and stupid in the same sentence, but not in the order you might expect, not in the way you have heard those two words used on this program many times before, because today is the day when Donald Trump finally said something that, now that he's actually said it, kind of seems inevitable. It is an historic turn for Donald Trump. It is a brand new use of the word stupid by Donald Trump. And it is the most important Trump usage of the word stupid ever. Because today, for the first time, Donald Trump called Republicans stupid, and he means millions of them. That was his word for Republicans who have been religiously devoted to him, Republicans who think of him as chosen by God. Donald Trump turned on those Republicans today and called them stupid and said the thing that no smart politician has ever said before, ever. Donald Trump said, I don't want their support anymore. I have often said on this program and elsewhere that no one insults the intelligence of Trump voters more than Donald Trump. No one thinks less of the intellectual capacity of Trump voters than Donald Trump. And he has always proved that in the way he pathologically lies directly to them about things that they know are not true. Donald Trump has always thought that he can do that to his supporters because he believes that they are not, in Donald Trump's mind, the kind of sharp people that he was trying to deal with in New York in his business career. Now, I have never once been able to predict what could separate the most fervent Trump supporters from Donald Trump, what could possibly get Donald Trump to publicly call them stupid and say, I don't want their support anymore. They never seemed to mind being lied to about tariffs. Trump supporters never seemed bothered by the nasty intellectual insults he used to hurl at them at his campaign rallies and his speeches when he told them that other countries would pay the Trump tariffs that they were going to have to pay. They never seemed excited about the Trump tariff passages in those speeches, but they were never bothered by Trump's public insults of them based on Trump's belief that not one of his voters knows what a tariff is. That insult didn't bother Trump voters, apparently. No political opponent of Donald Trump has been able to do anything that could separate Donald Trump from Republicans, get Donald Trump to call Republicans stupid and say, I don't want their support anymore. The only person who could do that is the person who said he was Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years and who killed himself in prison while awaiting trial on federal charges of sex trafficking. Jeffrey Epstein, the person standing beside Donald Trump in that blue shirt in that video right now. Jeffrey Epstein is the name Donald Trump never wants to hear. But Donald Trump's problem is the Jeffrey Epstein scandal that now surrounds Donald Trump and the Trump administration is very easily understood by reporters and the public and Trump voters, and people are paying attention to the name Donald Trump doesn't want them to ever hear. A new poll shows that 62% of registered voters are closely following the news about the Epstein Files. 63% disapprove of Donald Trump's handling of the Epstein Files, with 17%, only 17%, approving of Donald Trump, saying there's nothing to see here. No one causes more problems for Donald Trump than Donald Trump, and so Donald Trump's first solution to his Epstein problem was to try to change the subject with new tariff announcements every day or utter absurdities that are very simple and easy to understand that Donald Trump would say if he believed that Republicans' attention could be diverted because, as Donald Trump said today, they are stupid. That's his belief. And on the belief that they are stupid, last week, Donald Trump went back to a long-held target of his, Rosie O'Donnell, saying in a social media post, "I am giving serious consideration to taking away her citizenship." There is no way Donald Trump could take away the citizenship of natural-born citizen Rosie O'Donnell. Donald Trump knows that. But that was Donald Trump's idea of the moment, of how to change the subject from Jeffrey Epstein. It obviously failed spectacularly. But it did provoke a video response from Rosie O'Donnell yesterday from her new residence in Ireland, in which she said, quote, "I'm safe here in Ireland. I'm out of the reach of the tangerine Mussolini." And I gotta say, as nicknames for Donald Trump go, Tangerine Mussolini is a possible winner, and it certainly gave Rosie O'Donnell the win in her latest exchange with Donald Trump. It will be interesting to see what nicknames the Republicans who Donald Trump called stupid today will come up with to compete with Tangerine Mussolini. Donald Trump failed to distract attention from Donald Trump and his Attorney General's refusal to release the federal investigative files in the Jeffrey Epstein case, or any files in that case. The files that were on the desk of the Attorney General just days ago, according to the Attorney General's public comments. And this morning, the pressure got to Donald Trump. And so he did the worst thing he could possibly do in the middle of a scandal that he was hoping would disappear. He wrote a long social media post about the scandal, about the Epstein Files. Donald Trump gave the story much more fuel today, and he kept doing it all day, which is exactly the opposite of what a smart person would do in Donald Trump's position. And once again, Donald Trump distinguished himself as the vulgarian that he is in the presidency by using profanity in his written public posting, and for some reason putting the profane word in quotation marks in that weird way Donald Trump randomly and incorrectly uses quotation marks. And I mention that because if any other president had ever used that word in writing in public or verbally in public, the news media would rightfully explode over the use of that word and the collapse of presidential propriety. But this is the Trump era, and every standard of decency and accountability has been lowered for Donald Trump and for Donald Trump alone. Donald Trump, in his long post this morning, blamed the scandal about the Epstein files, of course, on the Democrats, saying, quote, "Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, and my past supporters have brought into this bullcrap, I'll call it, hook, line, and sinker. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will, even after being conned by the lunatic." Yes, they have been conned by the lunatic for many years now, but Donald Trump wasn't actually referring to himself when he said that, and it was just my artful edit that let it sound that way for a moment. What he actually said was, even after being conned by the lunatic left. Donald Trump ended that social media rant against Republicans, saying all these people want to talk about with strong prodding by the fake news and the success-starved Dems, is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success, because I don't want their support anymore. Weaklings. Donald Trump is calling Republicans stupid weaklings. And as of today, he doesn't have the support of the people he calls stupid and weaklings. But it will take some time to know if Trump's loss of their support is permanent. Calling them stupid and weaklings probably won't help Donald Trump.
Mr. President, I know you want to move past all this intrigue over the Epstein files, but I do want to ask you to clarify something you said this morning. You said this was all a hoax. Has your Attorney General told you this was a hoax? What evidence have you seen of that?
No, it's not the Attorney General, no. I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier that turned out to be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the intelligence, so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net.
And there you have Donald Trump's description of stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans. And he kept going.
Instead, they want to talk about the Epstein hoax. And the sad part is it's people that are really doing the Democrats' work. They're stupid people.
They're stupid people. He's talking about Republicans. And no, the sad part is not that we're talking about the Epstein files. The sad part is what happened to those little girls when Donald Trump's friend, Jeffrey Epstein, got his hands on them. Michael Flynn served 24 days as Donald Trump's first national security advisor before being fired by Donald Trump and then convicted of federal crimes for which Donald Trump, of course, pardoned him today. Michael Flynn wrote this on social media, addressed directly to Donald Trump. I hesitated to write this, however, with the utmost respect and deference to you for all you've withstood. Few know it better than me, what the deep state can do when they want to turn on a person. The Epstein affair is not about who killed him or if he committed suicide personally. I'm glad this known pedophile is dead, but neither is this a hoax. This issue goes beyond all that. There are millions of Americans who've overwhelmingly voted for you to be our president, and we want you to be massively successful. No one more than me. All we want at this stage is for a modicum of trust to be reestablished between our federal government and the people it is designed to serve. That's all, period, exclamation point. An element that is of great importance surrounding this Epstein affair is the fact this man was a known pedophile, had a list of clients who represented the upper crust of society and likely did untoward things to children on his island, in his homes in New York City and New Mexico, and maybe elsewhere. He was convicted of it, regardless of what class of society abuses and commits crimes against children. It is never acceptable. This is where this argument went off the rails. It is not about Epstein or the left. It is about committing crimes against children. If there are leaks inside of our country that have committed crimes against children, shame on them. They must be held accountable. A sampling of Trump-supporting media today was not supportive of Donald Trump on the Epstein files. Alex Jones spoke directly and hysterically to Donald Trump on his program.
You have put the gun in your mouth and ours collectively. Stop it. Stop it. Stop. 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 For God's sakes, don't attack your constituents when they have morals and aren't robots.
Media Matters sampled callers to Trump-supporting shows today.
What about justice for these young ladies who were trafficked? What about their justice? Don't they deserve justice?
I think Pam, overpromised, underdelivered.
Jeffrey Epstein killed himself before trial, but his co-defendant and co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, went to trial in 2021. She did not testify. The prosecution called 24 witnesses over 10 days of testimony, including 4 of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's victims. At the time, the Associated Press reported, quote, "The first 3 women testified as Jane, Kate, and Carolyn. First names are pseudonyms intended to protect their privacy. The last was Annie Farmer, who took the witness stand using her real name. Jane said she was 14 when she met Maxwell and Epstein at a music camp where Epstein was a benefactor. Maxwell showered her with attention in a way that left her vulnerable the moment she was first instructed to follow Epstein into his pool house in his Palm Beach, Florida estate in 1994, she said. When he began to sexually abuse her, I was frozen in fear, she said. I'd never seen a penis before. Prosecutors wanted evidence that Maxwell was a direct participant. Jane gave it to them by claiming Maxwell and Epstein fondled her together. When a prosecutor asked her why, as the defense pointed out, she didn't initially reveal everything about her experiences with Epstein in initial interviews with law enforcement. She said, fighting back tears because it was too difficult emotionally, too difficult on every level. 14 years old, that's what Donald Trump and his attorney general are hiding. 14 years old. The investigative files on a man who Donald Trump said he knew for 15 years, a man who said he was Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years and who raped that child when she was 14 years old. They are protecting that man in the grave and who knows who else. Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys know that their only hope of ever getting her out of prison will probably be a Trump pardon on the final day of the Trump presidency. And today, they released a statement praising Donald Trump. One of Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers said this about Donald Trump: he's the ultimate deal maker, and I'm sure he'd agree that when the United States gives its word, it should keep it. With all the talk about who's being prosecuted and who isn't, it's especially unfair that Ghislaine Maxwell remains in prison. And to deepen the mysteries that live in and around the Epstein files, new reporting indicates that there was a gap of 3 full minutes on the video recording of the door of Jeffrey Epstein's jail cell on the night that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. The 1-minute gap had been previously reported in that video, but new analysis by Wired indicates the actual gap is a full 3 minutes. That's one of many elements of the case that indicate that there remains much to investigate in this case. It's a case that never went to trial. And so the contents of those investigative files on Jeffrey Epstein were never fully revealed in a courtroom, as they were destined to be if he did not die in his jail cell. And Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee, which has jurisdiction over the Justice Department and the Attorney General, want to conduct that investigation of this case. Here is the top Democrat on that committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, in yesterday's Judiciary Committee hearing.
There's something that everybody here, at least I used to think, agreed with, which is let's release the Epstein files. That guy is a child sex offender who's convicted of it and then took his life before the larger trial could take place. His associate, Ms. Maxwell, is in jail for 20 years. The whole country is saying, release the files. That's what Donald Trump said. That's what J.D. Vance said. That's what the Attorney General said. That's what the FBI director said. And now suddenly they want to sweep the whole thing under the rug. Why don't we have a real hearing with real government officials talking about the government and talking about a real investigation with the real problem, which is the nationwide crisis in the sexual abuse of children and human trafficking? Why don't we do that? I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Joining us now is Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Congressman Raskin. What is at stake now in the House of Representatives in the pursuit of truth in this case, in the pursuit of who is being protected and how by Donald Trump and the Attorney General's choices in this case?
Well, there's a stench of corruption and predation and exploitation that hangs over this whole matter, as you were saying. And look, this started a long time ago. If you remember Trump's Secretary of Labor, Alex Acosta, he was actually the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida when this first came up. And the Department of Justice had prepared a 60-count federal prosecution against Epstein for all of the charges of statutory rape, solicitation, running this conspiracy, and on and on. Acosta reduced that to a plea bargain for one state count of solicitation. He let him go on 60 counts. This is a guy who should have obviously spent the rest of life in prison for what he had done. They also excused 4 people who were Epstein's aides de camp as part of that plea bargain agreement. And he didn't even have to go to jail during the daytime. He had to spend the night in a special room they had set up for him in the Southern District of Florida. I think it was in Palm Beach. So there's been a double standard from the very beginning. This is about corruption. This is about the wealthy and the powerful being able to manipulate the justice system to get away with their crimes. And so I guess when it was convenient for Donald Trump and for Pam Bondi to raise it and to spread, even greater conspiracy theories about the whole thing, they did it. And the moment they're in office and they've got the opportunity to commit the simple act of turning over the files to the public, that is, after Epstein is dead, after Maxwell is already in federal prison for 20 years, and after a third Confederate also took his own life. So all of those cases are over. Now they're trying to throw up every possible other distraction. Like, let's get a special prosecutor. For what? Epstein is gone. What other crimes are they talking about? Just release the files to the public. That's what Trump himself has been demanding, and J.D. Vance and everybody else in Trump world. That's what they were asking for. That's why millions of people are upset. Trump says it's like a Democratic plot. No, this has been led by MAGA. It's the MAGA people who are saying it, and we're agreeing with them. Let's clear the air. Let's get the truth and the facts out there and finally put an end to this constant corruption and cover-up.
Yeah, I listened to many more callers to those right-wing talk shows today, and they're so clear on this, and they sound perfectly logical for once, knowing that they've been lied to, and knowing that they've been lied to by Trump world, and that that they've done a 180 on this. That they understand it perfectly. And what I'm wondering about in the larger frame of this is, if they can unlock the mechanics of one very simple pattern of Trump lying on the Epstein files, what happens when they start applying that same logic to tariffs and other issues, Medicaid cuts, things that they have been lied to about? Once that formula becomes available to the thinking of these kinds of voters, what's the limit?
I'm totally with you. The same thought has been running through my mind. I mean, Trump did not campaign on throwing 14 million Americans off of their Medicaid health coverage. And again, that's going to hit a lot of Trump's people as well as a lot of Democrats and independents. But the point is, it's hitting Americans. He didn't campaign on that. He did campaign on releasing these files. He should at least keep that promise. But in a larger sense, we've got to look at what this administration has done with respect to human trafficking and the protection of children. They dismantled 69 different programs, defunding them through the Department of Labor that were meant to combat human trafficking and child labor around the world. They have dismantled all kinds of programs at the Department of Justice, at HHS, and other agencies that were designed to protect people against human trafficking. So we're talking about child sex abuse scandals, not just the Jeffrey Epstein one, but the kind that we've seen at Michigan State, at Ohio State, in the Boy Scouts, in all these churches. All of these things are taking place now, and they're making it much easier for the predators to get away with it. And so, you know, some people would say, well, I'm very upset because I love Donald Trump. Why is he doing this? It's out of character. Others would say, hey, he's an adjudicated sexual predator himself out of New York. What else would you expect to happen? But regardless, their policies are hurting our people, and we've got to turn it around. And let's start by having some truth and clearing the air over this whole Epstein affair as quickly as possible.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You bet.
Thank you. And coming up, tonight's episode of What If Biden Did That? We'll be joined by Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman. That's next. Time for tonight's episode of What If Biden Did That?
He's a terrible Fed chair. I was surprised he was appointed. I was surprised, frankly, that Biden put him in and extended him, but they did.
As we have come to expect, there was no outcry from the White House press corps about Donald Trump saying that Joe Biden appointed someone who Donald Trump himself appointed. What Donald Trump got right in that statement was that Joe Biden extended the appointment of Jerome Powell as chairman of the Federal Reserve. It was a 4-year appointment made by Donald Trump, which expired during the Biden presidency, and Joe Biden extended that appointment for another 4 years. And there's Donald Trump today saying, I was surprised he was appointed. I was surprised, frankly, that Biden put him in and extended him, but he did. There would be screaming headlines in the New York Times and the Washington Post and other publications around the country tonight if Joe Biden had ever said anything like that. Because Joe Biden was held to the standards of a normal person, and Donald Trump is not. And Donald Trump is the 79-year-old incoherent son of a father who suffered from Alzheimer's in his later years, and no White House reporter dared to point out to Donald Trump that he was wrong about who appointed Jerome Powell. No one told Donald Trump that he appointed Jerome Powell. No one asked Donald Trump if he was okay. No one asked Donald Trump if he knew what day it is. But they kept asking Donald Trump if he was going to fire Jerome Powell, even though the president does not have the legal power to fire the chair of the Federal Reserve. Donald Trump, who likes to try to humiliate people by accusing them of asking stupid questions whenever he can, missed his big chance today to say how stupid it was to ask if the president is going to fire someone the president cannot fire. And Donald Trump denied New York Times reporting, which said President Trump showed off a draft of a letter firing the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome H. Powell, during a meeting with roughly a dozen House Republicans on Tuesday night, polling them as to whether he should do it and indicating that he likely would, according to two people briefed on the meeting. Today, Donald Trump was asked about that letter.
Are you completely ruling out the idea of firing Jerome Powell?
I don't rule out anything, but I think it's highly unlikely unless he has to leave for fraud. But I think he's not doing a good job. He's got a very easy job to do. You know what he has to do? Lower interest rates.
Decide
implied that you are going to fire him? Have you drafted a letter?
I haven't drafted a letter.
So you didn't show a letter to Republican lawmakers last night?
No, I talked about the concept of fire him. I said, what do you think? Almost every one of them said I should. But I'm more conservative than they are.
Donald Trump has now earned the worst polling of his political career on economic issues, with 60% of Americans disapproving of Donald Trump's handling of the economy. 61% disapprove of his illegal, unconstitutional, and economically illiterate tariffs. 58% say Donald Trump has not gone far enough to try to reduce the price of everyday goods. 61% disapprove of the Trump Republican budget bill. Only 29% think the Trump Republican budget bill will help the economy, and only 16% say their family will be better off because of the bill. Our next guest, Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman, notes, we'll presumably hear many attempts to explain the strategy behind all of this, but there clearly isn't a strategy, just the prejudices of an ignorant man and his enablers. Joining us now is Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman. He is distinguished professor at City University of New York's Graduate Center and a former New York Times columnist who is now posting his work on Substack. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Professor Krugman. First of all, what do you make of what's going on with Donald Trump's public discussion about the Fed chair?
Well, I mean, yeah, he does not have the legal right, which I'm not sure in this world right now whether legality really matters, and they're trying to drum up a scandal to force Powell out over crazy, construction budgets. But the really amazing thing is that Trump, there's a reason we have Fed independence, which is to insulate it from political interference, and above all, interference from politicians who have absolutely no idea what the Fed's job is and what it's supposed to be doing. And if you read about, if you read Trump explaining why Powell should be fired and interest rates should be cut, he seems to think that you cut interest rates as a reward for good behavior. That he says, the economy is doing great, therefore the Fed should cut interest rates. Of course, if the economy is doing great, then you don't need to cut interest rates. In fact, that's exactly when you have to worry about overheating and causing inflation. So Trump is exactly the kind of person that an independent central bank is supposed to protect us from.
What would happen if Donald Trump got his way? If Jerome Powell's term were ending tomorrow, legally ending tomorrow, and Donald Trump's nominee could go in the next day, presumably under Donald Trump's orders in order to get the job in the first place, what would happen if, in effect, Donald Trump were functioning as the chair of Federal Reserve?
Well, the chair doesn't have, it's not a dictatorship inside the Fed. The decisions about interest rates are made by a committee. And at least initially, we would expect that whatever flunky Trump points would be outvoted by the other members, but pressure, who knows what would happen. If we got what Trump wants, well, we have some clear recent examples of that. The best one is Turkey, where inflation was starting to accelerate, and President Erdogan decided that he knew monetary theory better than the central bankers did, and forced them to keep interest rates low, and didn't change his mind until inflation hit 80%. At which point interest rates went up, and they're still almost 50% now. So, this could be this is one of